We are now officially going live. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the American Solidarity Party's 2020 election night live stream. I am your host and moderator, Tai-Chi Kuo. I was formerly an ASP National Committeeman and am now serving as Secretary of our Illinois chapter. Please allow me to introduce the distinguished panelists joining me on tonight's broadcast. Our 2020 presidential candidate and our 2018 California congressional candidate, Brian Carroll. During tonight's broadcast, Mr. Carroll will be providing a candidate statement to our viewers. Our 2020 vice presidential candidate, former American Solidarity Party chairman, now current Illinois chapter chairman, Amar Patel, will be joining us later tonight. Our 2020 Ohio congressional candidate, Shane Hoffman. During tonight's broadcast, Mr. Hoffman will be providing a candidate statement for our viewers as well. Current American Solidarity Party chairman, Skylar Kovich. During tonight's broadcast, Mr. Kovich will be providing a chairman's statement as well as periodic election updates, focusing on those results pertaining to our candidate, Brian Carroll. Our current American Solidarity Party Vice Chairman, Patrick Harris, will be joining us later in this broadcast. Our current American Solidarity Party National Committee woman, Christy Yao, will be joining us in a couple minutes' time. Current American Solidarity Party National Committeeman, Albert Thompson, will also be joining us later in this broadcast. And current American Solidarity Party volunteer, JP Kalb. During tonight's broadcast, Mr. Kalb will be assisting in providing periodic election updates, including screen sharing electoral maps as published on the New York Times or other relevant sites. For our audience members joining from home, we invite you to post questions for our panel in the Q&A section. I will review these questions and consider them for adding to tonight's discussion periodically. We will begin tonight with some election updates of early results, which have already been released. JP, we're going to switch to you for your screen share, and then this time can be yours. JP, you're speaking on mute. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. All right, JP, please go ahead with the first race that you'd like to share some updates on.
I want to look at the key battleground state of Florida, as that is the big one this hour.
Okay.
Trump is ahead at the moment with some key counties in like Duval County, which is Jacksonville. Biden's leading there by 20,000 votes. Trump won that county in 2016, but the Democrats for governor and Senate in 2018 flipped the county, and it appears to be trending more blue this year.
Let's see.
Seminole County also turning blue this year. Used to be a more solid Republican county in the I-4 corridor. Went red back in 2016, now leans Biden. But the real story of the night from Florida is Miami County, where Trump has closed the margin between him and Mr. Biden to make it a 54-46 race, as Trump has at least 100,000 more votes there compared to 2016. And that's all I have at the moment.
All right. Any other early states that you would like to share some results from at this time?
Nothing out of Vigo County yet, so as that is one of the earliest bellwethers to usually watch for in the election.
Okay. All right. How are we doing? How are things going in Georgia and North Carolina? I think North Carolina
North Carolina is pretty slow at the moment. Not a lot there. Georgia, Trump has an advantage. Fulton County is, which is mainly Atlanta, is not in. Most of it is still out, so that's one to keep an eye on.
All right.
But other than that, Georgia leans Trump.
Got it. Got it. Well, thank you for the update for the current leaders in this election. Skylar, do you have anything to add in regards to how Brian is doing at this time? I think we might have lost Skylar there for a second. Which is okay for now. We will get him as soon as he returns. All right, ladies and gentlemen, what we'd like to do now is to turn our conversation over to some general discussion topics, which can be held by our panelists during this time. The first of which is going to be on legislative initiatives which party members may be interested in. These include police reform propositions, abortion-related laws, and ranked choice voting initiatives that are going on throughout the country. Why don't we start off the evening discussing some of these ranked choice voting initiatives. So Shane, I know that you had some details to share about the different ranked choice voting initiatives that are going on throughout the country, such as Massachusetts and Ohio. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can just give everybody a quick overview for anyone who's not familiar with ranked choice voting. What we have now is kind of colloquial called first past the post. Whoever gets the most votes wins. That person might have 30% of the vote. They might have 50, 60, 70, but whoever gets the most votes, the first count wins. What ranked choice voting does is it gives you a chance to rank the candidates in your preferential order. This allows you to give your number one preference to the candidate that best matches your conscience. And you don't have to worry about playing the role of spoiler and answering questions about how a vote for that person is really a vote for whoever is the opposite of the person you're talking to's vote. Right now, there is an initiative underway in Ohio. You can find it at Rank the Vote Ohio. And I was talking with Justin from Rank the Vote Ohio earlier. He shared me a page that has a list of those initiatives. There are approximately 28 in process throughout the country. Let me see if I can pull that up here.
Yeah, give me a second. I might need to make you a co-host in order to allow the screen share. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, just a second here. Share screen. All right, let me pull that over here. Yeah, we've got quite a list here. 28 of the 50 states are currently in some level or other of getting a ranked choice vote initiative going. From my experience, having attended a couple of the early meetings, the process takes a long time. You're talking about having to raise millions of dollars, probably tens of millions of dollars for a voting initiative to get it put on the statewide ballot. You're talking about having to collect potentially hundreds of thousands of signatures. It varies depending on how you go on the ballot. In Ohio, you can need anywhere from like 130,000 to almost 500,000 signatures to get on the ballot. So this is what I like to call a greasy uphill roll. You're going to take years to collect enough volunteers to help get the signatures. You're going to have to train people to raise money. And most importantly, you're going to have to build that grassroots effort of knowledgeable advocates for ranked choice voting. The site I like to use right now, let me pull that back up, is if you go to rankthevote.com, it kind of forwards you right into Rank the Vote NYC, but they have a lot of information there that where you can learn to find out about ranked choice voting initiatives, what the pros and cons are. You can learn about some of the other voting initiatives like star voting, and there are a couple of others, but ranked choice voting is the one that's gaining the steam right now.
All right, thanks, Shane. And I know that from a party perspective, we did use ranked choice voting and we do use ranked choice voting for, I believe, all of our internal elections. And so if you're a member and you've been voting for the past year or so, you've experienced some ranked choice voting just within those particular actions that you've taken there. Skylar, do you or anyone else want to talk about just our experience as a party using ranked choice voting and what you see using the ranked choice voting and this initiative to push forward going ahead? Skylar, if you're speaking, you are on mute.
See, am I unmuted now?
No, you're good.
Great. So during the early part of the party's history, we used approval voting, which is still considered in our platform to be an improvement when it comes to elections for public office. But the problem with approval voting is that it still makes it so people feel like they need to vote too strategically, because if they're worried that candidates they only marginally prefer will end up beating the candidates they really prefer. They have to decide how many candidates they marginally prefer they want to still vote for in order to block the ones they least prefer. So with ranked choice voting, pretty much all of that concern goes away. You can rank the candidates you most want highest, and then the candidates you marginally prefer. So you can still try to block the ones who you really don't want. And so that did seem to be the case. We had one national committee election using ranked choice voting, and then we had our delegate elections and moved to the delegates choosing the national committee. But most importantly, this time we allowed all our party members to vote for the presidential candidate using ranked choice voting. So that was 3 candidates, Brian Carroll, Joshua Perkins, and Joe Schreiner. And I don't want to, I want to be careful here not to say anything negative about any of the candidates, but a lot of people had Joshua Perkins as their second choice. The people who wanted Brian Carroll and the people who wanted Joshua Perkins were a little bit similar. So people could do that to eventually vote for Brian and Joshua, or Brian and Joe, or a few people perhaps even voted for Joe and Joshua. And so that allowed people to be able to vote kind of pragmatically and also vote their conscience. And so Brian won that contest without any real dispute. And then for our delegate elections, we've broken it up into 4 regions, and quite often there'll be like 10 or 15 candidates for 6 seats. And there's a complicated mathematical calculation, but essentially the top 4 to 6 people per region end up becoming the delegates and end up deciding, oh, last year was the platform, this year was the statement of principles, and then also the national committee. And then more than likely, as the party grows, we might have delegate elections to choose our next presidential candidate as well.
All right, thank you, Skylar. And then JP, did you say that there are some RCV results that we could see in Massachusetts at this time?
That is correct. Let me pull it up.
And I will be, I'm a little bit behind here, but I am going to be checking in the presidential election results for us in New England over the next few minutes.
All right. That's excellent. Thank you, Skylar. And then I did hear that we did have some early results in from Guam already.
That's right.
Because they are in the Pacific, and we are Brian Carroll's at 5% in Guam. I think that's 136 votes because that is a smaller constituency. But we do not have any active. That's a jurisdiction we do not have any active party members or any activists there. So we thank you for our Guamian votes, and thank you for those in the military who are voting, if you are voting from Guam.
Definitely. And so, yeah, that came in just a little bit behind the Greens and Libertarians, and an alternative Green Party candidate who came in just ahead of us. They all got less than 200 votes.
So, Skylar, do you think that this may perhaps signal some larger changes for the party in terms of expectations for later on tonight?
Yeah, it's, I would say we were really grateful to be able to get on the ballot in Guam, which it turns out we probably could have in 2016 because it's a very easy process. We just weren't aware of it. But actually, a lot of the third-party candidates missed it, including Kanye West and the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and Rocky De La Fuente and Brock Pierce, and the Constitution Party. So it is also a little bit of an unrepresentative result, but of course we are really grateful to anyone who votes for us, and we're just going to have to take everything state by state or territory by territory in this case.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Skylar. Yeah, JP, please go ahead with the Massachusetts ranked choice voting early results.
From the New York Times, with only 3,000 votes in, the objective is currently down 68 to 32. Although it's just still early on in the votes.
Are they? Are we only seeing the top two candidates here in terms of Massachusetts votes, or are we able to pull up the full candidate list for president?
Let me check that. And
oh wait, we're looking for a ballot measure about ranked choice voting, I think, not candidates.
In Massachusetts?
yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Okay, got it.
That's why I'm saying it's down 68 to 32 at the moment.
Okay. All right. So my apologies. So Maine used to be part of Massachusetts a long time ago, but they are actively using ranked choice voting this time around. How is that race doing at this time?
Maine, we have nothing out of Maine at this moment. Not even in the Senate race there.
All right. Thank you, JP. So in addition to these ranked choice voting initiatives, we do have a number of other legislative initiatives that folks may be interested or who are in the party. So we do have amongst those the police reform, several police reform propositions. Christy, do you have any information about particularly interesting police reform propositions that are being that are currently on the ballot right now?
Yes, I do. I actually recently wrote an article for Rehumanize International, or a blog post rather, and many of these included police reform. It's important to remember that a lot of people are kind of fear-mongering, where they're saying, oh, the liberals, they want to defund the police, they want to destroy the police and have people running in the streets with fire and all that. When that's not true. What police reform means, or defunding the police means, is allocating the funds to community measures, which is something I think a lot of people can agree on. if they really look into where the money's going. So a lot of major cities, including San Francisco, Portland, Philadelphia, they have measures to kind of reallocate funds. Pittsburgh and San Diego as well have measures to either form like citizen boards that would hold some accountability to the police. There's in Philadelphia, it's a mostly ceremonial amendment, but it's still significant that it's being voted stop and frisk searches, kind of to put a stop to unconstitutional stop and frisk searches, which are obviously already illegal, but they want to just kind of double down on their enforcement of police officers not doing these illegal stop and frisks when they're racially profiling someone. To do a stop and frisk, they're supposed to kind of actually have some sort of evidence, I guess, or not just be based on someone's race or the way they look, that they would have some sort of suspicious activity. There's actually 2 measures in the Seattle area, in King County, Washington, that could affect law enforcement. One is to appoint instead of elect a sheriff, which I found interesting. The idea behind it is that it makes the sheriff less politicized. And the second is to allow the county councils to set the duties of the sheriff. So, yeah, a lot. And then in Los Angeles, there's a similar. Oh, sorry.
Oh, what's going on?
Skylar,
Oh well.
yep, no worries there, Skylar. Yeah, so Christy, please do continue. Sorry.
Yeah, I just had another one in Los Angeles County. The Board of Supervisors put forth an amendment called Reimagine LA County, and it distributes a minimum of 10% of the county's unrestricted funds to racial justice initiatives and alternatives to incarceration. And it says specifically this money cannot be used for law enforcement or prisons. And the idea behind this is that minority communities have been unfairly treated, and it's time to kind of give back. So lots of good things out there.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that, Christy. So just before we continue with our conversation on police reform, we do have a question from the audience. I do see that they are unable to type into the chat right now. So James, we're going to allow you to talk. Please do ask your question, and then we'll pose it to our panelists. James, you can go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, James. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm happy to be listening in to you folks. Tomorrow morning on the open door, we'll be using some of the information that we've gleaned from you tonight. And I was glad to see Christy reporting on Los Angeles County. And I don't have any specific question at this time. I'm noticing that on the MSNBC, beloved by my brother who lives with us, that everybody is saying too early, too early, too early. And I thought it was too early. So we'll stay tuned. Thanks, you folks, for giving us this leadership. Much appreciated.
Thank you, James. It's great to hear from you again. I know that just going on the open door was one of the more fun experiences during my tenure on the National Committee, and it's definitely wonderful to hear from you again. So thank you. All right, now to return to our conversation on police reform. So Christy, are there any specific measures that you think out of these that are currently proposed that are particularly salient and ones which you would urge our party to consider in greater detail?
Yeah, so I encourage our party really to take a look at all of them and see, as we look into restorative justice, which I think the consistent life ethic in our party is all about, to consider moving around kind of this money that is set aside for law enforcement and seeing, well, where can we put this more back into the community to make it less of an authoritarian system and less of a retributive justice, or less of a retributive justice kind of system and more restorative, more at the community and really helping people, not just punishing people. So I guess if I were to choose an amendment, I do like the Reimagine LA County one. I do like how it specifically gets to the root of the matter and helps with racial justice initiatives and alternatives to incarceration. That's something I would really like to see our party focus on.
Thank you, Christy. Brian, I know that since you live in the greater Los Angeles area, do you have any comments on that particular initiative that's going on?
Well, if you consider the greater Los Angeles area, the 200 miles north of Los Angeles, actually, I'm closer to Bakersfield and Fresno, which is Central California, and I have not watched the particular things that are unique to Los Angeles. We're kind of halfway between Los Angeles Dodgers and San Francisco Giants territory, so we're out of LA.
Got it. All right, so Sacramento Kings are your basketball team of choice then, I'm assuming?
Well, actually, my basketball team would have to be just a local high school.
I see. All right, now let's move over our conversation into the abortion-related laws that are currently being considered. As I understand it, there is one in the state of Colorado as well as one in Louisiana. So Shane, I do understand that you had conducted a little bit of research into what the Colorado proposition is, Proposition 115, and as well as the Louisiana Amendment 1. So do you want to talk about that and introduce that to our viewers right now?
All right, here. Is my screen being shared out? All right. Proposition 115, right here, it says abortions after 22 weeks would be lawful if the physician believes it's immediately necessary to save the life of a pregnant woman. In general, this initiative would prohibit abortions after 22 weeks, as calculated from the first day of the woman's last menstrual period. So essentially what this does is this rolls back the point to which an abortion is illegal. Let's scroll down here just a little bit more here. Because at the current point, they don't restrict abortions. Just a second, I'm having a hard time seeing my screen here. Sorry, we're gonna have to come back to this in just a second. My apologies.
Nope, not a problem. So while we continue to obtain more information about this current initiative, why don't we switch over to Brian? Brian, why don't we share about just how these past couple of weeks of the campaign have gone? We do know that these races always pick up in terms of intensity and in terms of excitement. What have you seen from voters and the people that you've been interacting with over the past several weeks?
Well, these last couple of weeks have been incredible fun. The fact that people started voting really 4 weeks ago in some states means that we have had a steady stream of people coming on to the Facebook page and the Twitter and things and saying, hey, we voted for you already. So there's been a daily volume of encouragement that has really been neat that I don't think has been part of previous elections. So that has been fun. I did do some traveling. In early October, I flew to Denver, Colorado for the debate of candidates. The debate was sponsored by the Fair and Equal Elections, or Free and Equal Elections Foundation, and opened the debates. And so we had a debate in Colorado, in Denver, Colorado, which was fun. I think a lot of people appreciated that one. And then another one scheduled on short notice in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Basically the same people participating. But I think it was an even better debate than the first one. So there more travel here at the end. We did not travel at all. Starting middle of March until the beginning of October, we stayed home and campaigned from home. Did a lot of fun interviews and a lot of fun stuff, but didn't travel. But the debates were definitely a high point, and I enjoyed those. And then just every day, hearing from people who have voted for us. Today, I got several from states where they know that their votes will not even be reported. North and South Carolina and West Virginia. And people are writing and saying, you know what, we're voting for you, even if the state's not going to count our vote. And so that was really, really encouraging.
Thanks, Brian. So let's talk about some of your debate experiences in a little bit more detail. I understand that you were actually snowed in Wyoming when you went to the Cheyenne debate. I know that is that the first time you've ever been snowed in terms of that type of experience?
Oh, well, 30 years ago, my parents were living up in Tehachapi in the mountains above Los Angeles there. And we went up there for Christmas and got snowed in a day. But it's not part of my regular experience. I don't have the kind of weather that you guys have in Chicago. Here in Visalia, where I live, the last time we had snow, we had about 2 or 3 inches in 1999. So it's not part of our regular every winter experience. But that was fun. I got out of a snowstorm, ahead of a snowstorm in Iowa. In October of last year. I was at Dordt College for a conference and spoke there, and looked at the weather report, and I had planned to spend Sunday just kind of enjoying a day off, and I looked at the storm warning and said, no, I got to get out of here. And so I made it all the way down to southern Kansas that day. And but the snow did get me in Cheyenne, Wyoming. That was they got the last shot.
And then you did get a chance to spend some extended time with some of the other candidates up there, Brock Pierce in particular. Do you want to talk a little bit about how his campaign is going and what you understand they're planning for the future?
I think this year he was just in it as a rehearsal for 2024. He admits that. And so he's putting together a team already. He's got the personal finances to start hiring people, hiring staff. And so he's going to be a significant factor, I think, in 2024. And he's working to put together a coalition of all the independents in the United States, which is an interesting concept because independents are independents because they're not as easy to get into a party. But he thinks that he can unite all the independents and have a independent primary, and then have all the independents support the winner of that primary. It'll be interesting to see if he can pull that off. One of the things that would require is that a lot of people that are independent because they disagree with each other would have to come together and agree to support the unified independent candidate. And that will be the test of whether he's able to do that or not.
Got it. Got it. So it seems that that the age of billionaire candidates is not going to be ending anytime soon. We'll see some, at least in this upcoming presidential election in 2024. So we do have a question from one of our viewers. Mr. Cedric Benner is asking, I noticed that Nebraska and Maine have split electoral votes, which I believe fits within a type of ranked choice voting. How does the electoral college votes in these two states work? Does anyone on our panel want to chime in regarding?
I can talk on that. In those states, there is one electoral vote given to each congressional district, and so in Nebraska, I believe it's the Omaha district, and it may very well be different than the rest of the state. And I think, when we talk about eliminating the electoral college, and a lot of people talk about doing that, but I don't think that's a realistic plan. I think far more realistic is to have states shift to the pattern of giving electoral votes by congressional district, and then the whole state would still have two to award to whoever was the big winner. But it does require that a lot of states do it kind of at the same time. Obviously, a state like California that has 55 electoral votes, if they were to split, it might be maybe 43-12 or something like that. And no state wants to give up its clout. But on the other hand, if we did that, candidates would need to spend more time campaigning in our state. Right now, candidates come to California and they go to Hollywood and they go to San Francisco to collect money, but they don't do a lot of campaigning because it's kind of a foregone conclusion that California is going to go blue. So if we went to that, suddenly candidates would have to spend more time campaigning here and pay more attention to the state.
All right, thanks, Brian. All right, and then Skylar, I believe that we do have some election updates in regards to some of Brian's performances out east. Skylar, do you want to jump on it?
Yes, let's see, you can hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great, so the fastest way to get some of these results is by typing in the state and then presidential results. So Vermont presidential results, Rhode Island presidential results. Right now, Brian Carroll is in a seventh place, a seventh or eighth place out of 21 candidates. Kanye West, who some people see as a bit similar to us, although with some major differences, is ahead of us. It's Libertarians at 1%, then Green Party, then Kanye West at about 400 votes, then two rather obscure independents who might actually only be on in Vermont, and then Brian Carroll at 77 votes so far, with about 38% of the vote in Vermont. So 77%, 77 votes so far for Brian Carroll in Vermont. He is a bit ahead of Don Blankenship of the Constitution Party and of Brock Pierce, actually, who is toward the back of the pack in Vermont so far. In Rhode Island, interestingly here, Donald Trump is slightly ahead in Rhode Island, which might mean the Republican areas are being counted first. So as of when I checked a minute ago, it was 15% of the vote in. Brian Carroll is unfortunately in last place out of the, I believe it's 5 candidates on the ballot at 149 votes, which of course is still far more votes than he got as than our candidate got as a write-in in 2016. So is also not far behind Gloria La Riva of the Party of Socialism and Liberation. And then the Libertarians having a pretty good night at 1%, over 1% as the largest third party.
Got it. And thank you, Skylar. How many percent, what percent of the vote has been counted so far?
In Rhode Island, it looks like 15, and I'll refresh this in a second. Oh, no, it's 30%. Let me see if there's an update here. Sorry if I may. Brian Carroll is now at 291 votes in Rhode Island. So I believe he had 291 in Rhode Island plus 77, and then 136 in Guam. He has passed 500 votes, which if any of you who are listening might not be avidly following us, it might seem kind of strange to think of it in that way, but for a third party, that it actually is a milestone worth watching.
All right, thank you for that, Skylar. I think that's excellent news for how we're doing so far. We do have a couple more questions from our audience, and just for those of you watching, we do have a couple people who are joining our stream as well. We do have ASP Vice Chair Patrick Harris has just joined, so welcome, Patrick.
Hi, sorry, I was having a little bit of difficulty connecting for a moment there, but I'm very glad to join you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to see you again, Patrick. How has your election experience been so far?
Well, I did get a chance to get out and vote today. I'm in Tennessee, where Brian is a write-in candidate, which was a bit of a chore because Tennessee required us to individually apply for write-in status to all 95 counties. And we were very fortunate that we were able to get access in most of them. So our supporters are able to get out there and vote today. And so I was very happy to do that. We do have another race near me in Tennessee that we'll be keeping an eye on, but perhaps we could talk about that later.
Yep. Thank you, Patrick. And thank you for your service as well. We know that getting access county by county, that does require quite a bit of paperwork. So thank you for your efforts there. This first question comes from Chad Wakabayashi, and it reads as follows. What would distributist economics look like in the post-industrial technological America? A lot of examples I've seen are a little too simplistic to be convincing. Could you speak a little on distributism pragmatically, also addressing potential solutions like UBI? So any of our panelists want to discuss specifically distributist economics and UBI?
I'd be happy to jump in on that if no one else does.
Sure, please go ahead.
Sure. So for those of you who aren't familiar, so distributism is, the set of economic ideas that is influential behind a lot of the ASP's economic platform. And one potential source of misunderstanding about that is that because distributism focuses so much on individual ownership, it's sometimes thought that the only way that you can have a distributist economy is for everything to be small scale, small businesses, family farms, things like that. And that is a very important part of what distributism is about. The famous slogan by G.K. Chesterton, one of the promoters of distributists, thought was 3 acres and a cow. That's what he wanted everyone in England to have. And a lot of people respond to that and they'll say, well, I mean, we can't all be small farmers. Not everybody's cut out to be a small business owner. Is this kind of anachronistic? But the thing that you have to understand is that the the key insight of distributism is about ownership. It's not necessarily means everybody has to be a small entrepreneur, and there are different ways to go about expanding ownership in society. And so on a larger scale, you can do that with worker cooperatives, you can do that with employee stock sharing programs, you can do that with, to some extent, with worker representation on corporate boards. All of these are ways to give people more power over their economic lives, and you can do that in a way that's entirely compatible with, modern large scale the distributists look for where economic activity can be on a small and local scale, but it doesn't have to be to still promote this idea of expanding ownership. And as far as UBI, that's kind of a complicated question. It's not one that our platform addresses directly, and I know that there's some disagreement about that within the Solidarity Party. But the thing about UBI that you can say positively for it is that it establishes a certain floor where everybody has a certain amount of income, and therefore a certain potential amount to allow them to engage on an equal footing in society, and potentially to take risks that they might not be able to otherwise because of financial insecurity. So it does have that going for it. I know there are also, some arguments about unintended consequences, and I think those are prudential questions. So I think people who broadly accept our vision for economic policy can come down on either side of UBI, but I do expect to see more discussion about that in the coming years.
All right, thank you, Patrick. So personally, on a personal perspective, do you have an opinion on UBI, or are you a supporter, or somewhat someone who's more of a critic or skeptic?
Is that directed to me, Taichi?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. So I would say I am interested. I am not necessarily a convert to the idea. I think that we do need to be having these kind of conversations about the basic structure of our economy, because in many ways it just isn't working for so many Americans. I do see arguments from people like, for example, Oren Cass at American Compass, who's sort of trying to rework the economic perspective of conservatives today, and who, is not a doctor. It sort of gives people at the very bottom, it, disincentivizes, is what he would say, and that he thinks that work is not just something that we do because, because we need money, but it's also something that gives people a sense of, structure and dignity in their lives, and that UBI could potentially be a way for us to normalize an economy where a whole lot of people are locked out of meaningful work. And potentially, therefore, work becomes something that's reserved for people who are a little bit social scale, and that there would be all kinds of negative consequences to that. But I do think it's a very serious criticism of UBI that has to be considered. I know there have been some pilot programs with UBI in countries like Finland, where they've kind of rolled it out on a part-time basis, and they seem to find that did not happen. That is to say that people were not disincentivized from working. But it's hard to say what that would look like on a society-wide scale, because no one's ever really done it. So I think it's worth thinking about those consequences and being cautious about it. But for myself, I would say I'm not yet sold on it, but I'm not completely opposed to it either. Got
it. Thank you, Patrick. And yes, so from a personal perspective, so I met Andrew Yang at one of his early presidential speaking tours here in Chicago. He made a stop, I believe it was December 2019. He was one of the early Democratic primary goers who were interested in computing. And it was interesting because he was basing his theory of UBI on Alaska and Alaska's system, wherein they would this is all based off of taxes that the oil companies in Alaska are currently paying. So there is a base that funds that UBI for the rest of society. So what he was proposing was that we implement some sort of a tax on innovation, or tax on robotics. And I do believe that some of that may be appropriate for implementation, especially as we see that we see that regardless of whether UBI in particular is implemented, we do need to have some sort of a solution in mind for increasing automation and the elimination of jobs, both blue collar and white collar, based on computers and robots taking those jobs and being able to perform those jobs much more efficiently and cheaply. You see that with accounting jobs now. We're beginning to see some of that in legal related careers as well. So although perhaps if more legal jobs went to computers, our society would be a much more pleasant place, certainly a lot less litigious place than it is today. If we eliminate lawyers. Brian, do you have any thoughts about UBI from your perspective?
I think Andrew Yang did everybody a great favor by making it an issue so people could start talking about it. And I think rather than maybe start with a full-blown UBI, the carbon fee and dividend ideas for taxing carbon that comes out of the ground and returning that to people as a citizen's dividend becomes kind of an introductory UBI. And I do believe that as citizens of the United States, everybody should jointly own the resources of the country. Right now, we have a system where kind of whoever got there the first gets to pass it on to the next generation of their family. And, excuse me. And I find a problem with that. We're all Americans. We should all own the minerals, the timber rights, water rights, and petroleum jointly in a way that at least we can tax it for the benefit of everybody. And that would be returned to everybody equally, nowhere near as much as the UBI that Yang was proposing, but it would be an introduction to that. And we can always add to it later as we see how that works.
All right, thanks, Brian. And as we check the time, we are currently closing in on 8 p.m. So JP, do we have any additional updates from the electoral map that we'd like to take a look at now? Please do share your screen if there are any.
I've got plenty to update on.
All right, please go ahead.
The key battleground state of Florida. Trump is way ahead at the moment, but we all know Florida can come close.
And
but
this
it
is
looks like,
and this is with 91% of estimated votes reported already.
Yeah, 91% in, and Trump's cruising to a 250,000 vote lead. With most of the big counties in, like most of Palm Beach is in, Broward is in, Broward is at over 98%, so there's a few more votes there, but not enough. Miami's at 93, so there's a bit more chunk of vote there, but not enough.
Are the Panhandle counties in up in the top left? Because my understanding was that's where a lot of them were still to come in Trump territory.
A good number of the votes are in the 130. Some of them are still early on, but a good number of the Panhandle ones are 90%.
Okay.
Volusia County's at 87%. Trump has the lead there. Seminole is close for Biden. Pinellas, which went red last time, is back in the blue column, so looks pretty good for Trump there at the moment. Switching gears to Ohio, it's a lot more competitive than we originally thought it would be. With over 50% in, Biden has a 54-45% lead. one of the counties, Lake County, went heavily Republican by 15 points last time around. Biden's winning it narrowly by 3%. Also, a lot of the votes are still yet to be counted. However, some of the areas like Delaware County was a red county last time. Biden's doing better there, so it's something to keep an eye on through the night.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, JP. Yeah, they have. Ohio is definitely notable because John Kasich actually campaigned there against Donald Trump as a Democrat or as a Republican for Biden. So, so we perhaps may be seeing some of his influence at play there in switching some of those voters over to voting for his opponent. JP, do you want to go through the larger map as a whole? I understand that several other races have been called already as well.
Yes, I do. Hang on 1 second. According to this is from 272n.com, based on the latest polling data. It is pretty tight at 75 to 63 Biden. We have a couple of states leaning at the moment. But according to the New York Times, it's 85 to 72.
All right, thank you.
For Biden.
All right, thank you. Thank you, JP, for that update. And Skylar, I understand that we do have some additional information in regards to Brian's numbers, especially from my home state in Illinois.
So you can hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great. So Illinois poll closings were a little bit earlier than I had realized. And Bryce Worgan, our party member who is very good at statistical analysis, said that when the polls closed, our initial reporting was at 2%, at a little over 200 votes, mostly from Boone County, if I understand correctly. At this point, we're not quite that high. We're at 0.2%. But with Illinois being such a big state, we have passed 1,000 votes in Illinois. And we are ahead of Gloria La Riva of the Socialism and Liberation Party in Illinois. Libertarians, again, at 1%. It's clearly the largest third party in the country tonight. And pretty much at all states that I've seen so far. And then there are only 5 candidates on the ballot, so we are in 4th place. So again, over 1,000 votes in Illinois, 1,012 when I checked just a minute ago. And that's only with 11% reporting. So we should, and I'm not sure about different parts of the state, there might be some precincts where we do especially well, but I would expect about 10,000 votes in Illinois tonight.
Thank you so much for that update, Skylar, and that's definitely exciting for us to hear. That alone would put us past our 2016 milestone in terms of votes overall. Is that correct?
Definitely, yeah. As we, so for those who don't know, a lot of the results in much of the country where we have write-in votes are not going to come in until later in November. That was the case in 2016. It would definitely be the case now, and we were only on the ballot in Colorado in 2016, and then we got some write-in results in Texas. We only got like a little over 1,000 votes during the whole night on election night in 2016, and then we got about 6,000 more votes after that. So tonight, we already have over 1,500 votes, which again might not seem like a lot to many of you, but for a growing third party, which was not able to do as much campaigning in person, it's extremely impressive. And Amar's and Tai Chi's connections in the Chicago area, Amar Patel being our vice presidential candidate, who was actually able to get a lot of support from people in his community, in his high school where he was teaching at. Having an active state chapter definitely helped, but we're still definitely getting the word out about the party, and our ability to get ballot access in Illinois was really a miracle, which actually happened because Illinois was one of the few states to make ballot access easier because of COVID.
Right, and then during the phase when we were, so I was part of that initiative, so I can comment on it just a little bit. But the challenges for votes, they went aggressively against Kanye West in Illinois, in his home state, although he's based in Wyoming now. But I thought it was interesting because of the potential spoiler factor that we could present. I think some people think that we are a conservative spoiler in terms of taking votes away from President Trump, and so we're less likely to challenge against us. Although I'm not, that's pure speculation on my part. But given how fiercely those challenges went against Mr. West, I do think that may be considered a possibility, considering that he was seen as a spoiler against Biden, and a spoiler potentially taking votes from potentially Democratic-leaning voters in the African American community, especially.
We were very fortunate that Brian and Amar didn't get caught up in those challenges. They did not just challenge every third-party candidate as a part of that. Tai Chi, I'd like to ask you, were you aware of the party at all in 2016?
I was not aware of the party in 2016. So it was only after the election and a bit of soul searching on my part, because I'd voted for Aleppo guy, Gary Johnson, but rather reluctantly voted for Gary Johnson. I really had to take a gut check and think to myself whether or not there was a future for me if I was to continue voting Libertarian. Was that something that I could full-heartedly get behind, or whether I would revert to previous political leanings, whether Republican or Democrat, and I really found that there wasn't really much of a way back in terms of voting for Libertarians again, or for the Republicans or Democrats. Democrats, I think, 2008 Democrats with Barack Obama, I think that was a point where I would consider a Democratic candidate, any of those candidates. But then anyone from 2012 on, it became much more difficult for me to vote for a Democratic candidate.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I obtained my U.S. citizenship in 2009. So a lot of this is just speculating on my part. I was very happy to, that was the first time I had cast a presidential ballot, and I was very disappointed that I had to vote against some of my beliefs for Gary Johnson. And this time I was much more pleased to be able to vote for Brian.
Definitely.
And I think this type of sentiment is something that we're seeing on a national scale. If we look at our social media, we're seeing a tremendous amount of people who are just relieved overall that they're able to be voting their consciences this time, and perhaps the first time in their lives, and are not having to trade off a lot of these and make these mental gymnastic type of moves in their heads to justify why they're voting.
We've seen hundreds of comments like that, gotten Facebook, Twitter, emails, phone calls. We're really, grateful for that, to have that support. And I guess I brought up, Tai Chi, you're coming to the party after 2016, and Amar also, I think, did not know about the party in 2016. So Illinois was not really an early state where we had a strong chapter for ASP. We didn't even get write-in votes counted in Illinois in 2016. So it's an example of having a few people who, especially who might live close to each other and might be able to have in-person meetings, can be extremely important for growing, what we have here today.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So I think that Illinois, in terms of post 2020, is going to be a challenge because they are one of the tougher states to get on the ballot for without these COVID exceptions being put in place. So we're very, very grateful for them. However, we will need to rapidly grow our party and organization there in order to meet the requirements there for next time. So I believe that the next, unless we take over 5% of the vote in Illinois, I think we're automatically able to to get on the ballot then. But if we do not, I believe we would have to obtain approximately 25,000 signatures next time through that ballot access initiative. But if you are interested in getting more involved and you are an Illinois voter, please do contact the party, and we'd be very happy to.
Right. So I'm going to step away for a few minutes to check on more election results, but I did just refresh Illinois, and we're up to 1,233 votes, still at 0.2% and fourth place out of 5 candidates.
Yes. No, I think that Illinois is actually has a lot of potential for us, especially and it's a growth market. We're seeing a lot of interest within the party, especially from disaffected evangelical Christians who are not willing to vote for Donald Trump a second time. And we do have several institutions in Illinois which we might be able to draw support from. So Wheaton College is in Illinois, as well as Moody Bible Institute. And then on the in regards to Catholic supporters, we do have Loyola University Chicago, DePaul University as well within the state.
And then also with Catholics, I know Dan Lipinski's district was like heavily Catholic, and of course he lost his Democratic primary this year, and so it'll be interesting to see if we do particularly well in that district.
So there used to be the saying that Illinois or Chicago specifically has more Polish people than Warsaw. I'm not sure if that statistic still holds true today, but we do have a strong Catholic interest here in Chicago. And I believe JP does have some updates in regards to the Illinois District 3 votes. So for those of you who may be unfamiliar, Dan Lipinski is a pro-life Democrat who was put in a primary contest by Marie Newman. The party ran a pro-abortion standard Democrat against him in a district that he's held for approximately 15 years, and his father has held for years and years before that as well. So it had been a family seat of sorts in Illinois. And JP, would you please go ahead with the update?
Currently in the Illinois third, Newman is up 52.9 to 47.1. So it's much tighter this year.
So thank you for that update, JP. And I'm sure that there will be additional updates as the night goes on. Some additional updates from our panel. We do have our National Committeeman Albert Thompson joining us tonight. So welcome, Albert. How are you doing, and how was your voting experience?
Everyone, my voting experience is actually quite lovely this morning. I predicted that lines are going to be relatively short because so many people had early voted. And so one of the things I did was got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, got ready, got to the polls around 6. It was social distance. Everyone was wearing their mask. Everyone was very polite, in and out there in 45 minutes. So actually shorter than most election days, where generally the lines are a bit longer. And I think it's just early voting's been so high. And I had my Brian Carroll sign with me. And so before I got in line, I made sure to put it in front of the polling place. So I will have to go and collect that tomorrow.
Thank you for doing that. That's
yes,
great to hear.
And I'm actually on with the candidate, so I can say, Brian, I put a sign out front with your name on it.
All right, Albert, I know that.
Thank you very much, Albert. I appreciate that. And just be sure and pick it up tomorrow so we don't get fined.
You got it.
Yes. And so, Albert, I understand that you've put together a series of election maps over the course of this presidential campaign. And you recently released one earlier today, I believe, with
Mhm.
your predictions. Do you want to talk to us about that? Are you willing to share that for the audience?
I mean, sure. If you've got a picture of it and you want to show anyone, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, and you can share screen on your. Give me 1 second. I can give you that ability as well.
Yeah, I'll have to pull it up. I mean, my thinking was that there's just so much we're not going to know tonight due to how various states. I mean, it would be great if we had a national election law that clarified for citizens, no matter what state you lived in, exactly how your vote was going to be counted. And I can see a common good approach to that being that the rules are clear to everyone. As it is, each state has different rules. And so there's whether or not it's postmarked, whether or not it rise day of, 3 days after, different things. So just so much we're not going to know. So what I was basically looking at was how the election might shake out based off of trends regarding really anger, voter registration, how Trump performed versus how Romney performed in 2012. So I was kind of looking at Trump numbers in 2016 versus Romney numbers in the same state in 2012. And with the idea being that Romney was running against a more popular candidate in President Obama, and Donald Trump was running against Hillary Clinton, who's extremely unpopular. And if he underperformed Romney in a particular state, that might be telling about where he might shake up this time. And then also the 2018 saw the first real sort of a jump in the youth vote. That was very surprising to me because normally we always say the youth vote's going to come out, the youth vote's going to come out, and then it doesn't come out. And then 2018, the youth vote saw, I think, somewhere around a 60% increase. And so if people held that kind of, just held on to that from 2018 and brought it in 2020, I think the youth vote will be very telling, especially since so many, and I say this as a professor, that so many youth are not on campus right now. A lot of times students move across country and they register to vote at the location of their university. Millions of freshmen didn't show up, right? They stayed home and they're attending class digitally. And so if they're registered to vote, they're still registered to vote in their home community. How's that going to affect races? And so that's kind of my general feeling about how the race is going to shape up. I think that Georgia will be very interesting. I think that North Carolina will be very interesting. I think that it's interesting that I think I got the most shock from people about my Texas prediction, but I think that Biden is still ahead in Texas right now with over 50% of the polls in. So I find that interesting. But I mean, this is just kind of, I like to have fun with these and base it off of, different ethnic histories, where different groups moved into the country during the 19th and 20th century, where they tended to settle. And then you end up having, different politics that come from that. So different politics in the Great Lakes region versus, say, the deep and upper South. And just kind of looking at where people tend to fall on the issues and whether or not Trump has actually increased Republican ID. So I'm still interested in Pennsylvania, though it's trending against my prediction right now, just because Trump was able to close the gap in voter registrations. The number of Democrats versus Republicans in Pennsylvania has declined by 200,000 in 4 years, which to me is interesting that you have more people in Pennsylvania identifying with the Republicans during 4 years of Trump than they did previously. So, that you just didn't see that in a lot of places. So that's kind of the thinking that went into here. And I think also because I'm not a professional pollster and I don't have to sell a product or anything, I'm able to kind of get beyond myself and just look at the numbers and what I think they're trending without any fear of backlash or any consequence if I'm wrong. I mean, if my prediction is wrong, it's wrong, right? It's nothing to it. But this is just kind of my thinking. Although if I were to do a map, I probably should have done a map showing where I think ASP will be in 4 or 8 years based off of the states where I think that we have a lot of room to make up based off of the ceiling that I think we have. I think we actually have a much higher ceiling than the Libertarians. And the Libertarian Party has been around since the 40s. They've kind of hit their ceiling, and to a large extent based off of how many people actually agree with the Libertarian position. I think the ASP ceiling is probably 8 times higher than that. And that ASP is really a party that probably represents somewhere around 30 to 40% of the American people in terms of our actual positions and where we come down the issues, so that our margin to grow is much higher. And ASP is a party that can be competitive in Pennsylvania and California both, despite their differences, that can actually be competitive in New England in a way the Republicans will not be competitive in New England. And so I think it's an exciting time to be in the party and see how this election shapes out and where the realignment happens and doesn't happen. So
right,
back
thank you, Albert.
Tai Chi.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, and again, these are personal predictions, so we aren't we aren't judging or anything. We just thought that. Thank you, Albert, for your informed take on how the election could potentially turn out. So we do have an update in regards to a couple of those races that were touched upon in that discussion there. JP, do you want to talk about Texas and about Pennsylvania?
Yes, I do. In this state of Texas right now, Trump has just taken a slight lead of 1,000 votes. Biden was leading through most of the night, but now Trump's surging, and there's a lot more votes for Trump outstanding, especially in the rural parts.
So what we're seeing is urban Texas, Houston,
Yep.
Austin, Dallas is voting blue.
Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Austin, even the suburbs of Austin that were red a few years ago, they've gone blue this year. Shifting gears to Pennsylvania, Biden's leading by 300,000, but Biden's home county of Lackawanna, which, as Biden talked about himself being from Scranton, which is in Lackawanna County, Trump's running up there, which is pretty much in a continuation of 2016, where Trump came close in that county. It's still early in Pennsylvania, though. And one last state to look at is Ohio, where Lake County has just broken for Trump. There should be a lot more Trump votes coming in soon, especially around the main part of the state. But at the moment, Biden leads there. And one more final look in the state of Michigan. Trump is ahead there in both Macomb and Oakland County, which are the suburbs of Detroit. Macomb County, especially as that is the home of the Reagan Democrats. This will be a race I'll keep an eye on.
All right, thank you, JP. Yeah, and so that is very interesting to see. So I think Pennsylvania is definitely going to be interesting because we do have some very difficult decisions for those formerly iron Democrat votes in the coal in the coal sector. So we do have Vice President Biden with his election pledge to transition out of using fossil fuels or oil by 2025, and I think that we may be seeing some impact from that, although those votes were very lukewarm for the Democrats in 2016 as well, and were a lot of what people were attributing the victory for Donald Trump in 2016 to as well. So I think that is definitely something to keep keep in mind going forward. And then also another trend to keep in mind is the immigration rates in Texas. So we do have a lot of people moving from the state of California to Texas and other states within the Southwest. We're already seeing the much tighter race there, and we'll continue to see how that will go later on tonight. All right, so Brian, do you have a comment or a question?
I was just looking at results in Boone County, Illinois, with 71% in we have 287 votes, and that's 1.6%. So I'm just wondering, who did we have over there in Boone County campaigning for us?
Is Bonnie there at the northern Illinois?
I think
Bonnie
Bonnie's in
Gal-
Right on the border with Wisconsin. So I was wondering if maybe the Bovies came across and campaigned in Illinois. I don't know.
It's possible. She is in Northern Illinois. I do have to
Bonnie,
check.
yeah.
I thought she was still in Cook County, but although I might be mistaken.
Yeah, and there is one person from Northern Illinois by the name of Powell Kazupa, I believe, who sent me a message. Really enthusiastic.
Well, that will certainly be a group to follow up with and an
Yes.
area to follow up with as well.
I tried to put in the chat. I'd like to go over some of the Southeastern results, if you don't mind.
Please go ahead.
So Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi are all states where we made the ballot and Kanye West also made the ballot. So the trend that we can see across all the states I've looked at so far is Libertarians, by far the largest third party, then Kanye West, and then we are somewhere behind him, but not too far behind him, in the middle. So Arkansas has more of the vote counted at 41% right now. Let me see. We are at 677 votes in Arkansas right now, just slightly behind Don Blankenship and Brock Pierce. Going to go back to Louisiana, which has a, and all of these states have had, much more energetic state chapters lately. Louisiana was one of the easiest states to get on the ballot, but we had to find an elector in each congressional district, but we did not need a petition. And we did not make it in 2016. And it's, by the way, it's also impossible to write in votes in any of these three states. Okay, 7% of the vote reporting. And we are in 6th place, I believe. So Brian Carroll, American Solidarity Party at 188 votes. Right behind Kanye West, actually. So we are actually in 5th place in Louisiana at 188 votes. We are right ahead of a candidate called President Body, who's some sort of independent who might only be on the ballot there in a couple of states. We were behind him when I last checked. Unfortunately, we are now ahead of him. Sorry, Tai Chi, did you have a comment?
Yes, so these are all very encouraging results. So as Albert said earlier, we do have a lot of cause to hope, a lot of excitement within the party right now. And as you were commenting on earlier, we've already exceeded our election night ballot totals, although the other write-in totals came in later in the days and weeks to come. So specifically in regards to next steps for the political party, do you have any plans that you'd like to discuss or share with us at this time? How would you instruct, or how would you encourage someone to get involved locally?
Right. So one of the most difficult things is to try to find like-minded people who are actually willing to organize a party. There are lots of reasons why it's hard to get friends to organize. Some of them might be a little bit too attached to the Democrats or Republicans, and some of them are too attached to being politically alienated. They will sympathize with the party and be very supportive, but they would rather focus on something else. So I think for creating a local party chapter to get maybe some of those people on board is, it could be good to create either an intellectual project like a book club, or a service project, which I know Amar, I think Tai Chi, you've been involved too. That's been very successful in the Chicago area in Illinois. So those are some ideas, but it can be a little bit hard to track with people who might have signed up in your area who might be really interested, but may be busy and don't always respond to the first email. But that's why it's important for local people who are interested in the party to remain in touch with your state chapter, remain in touch with the national party, and to be able to network with those people. A lot of that's being done through Facebook and through Twitter right now. But we want to do more of that on email and actually offline as well, because we know that there's many people who are offline, and we tend to be very online people who are really involved in the party. But a lot of the people who were involved online less might actually be really good at in-person organizing. And we do hope to be able to do more of the in-person organizing next year as hopefully the COVID crisis abates. Now, we do still want to cultivate influencers. So there's some what we call public intellectuals like Charlie Camosi, Leah Labresco, Gracie Olmstead. And some of them are on what we call our board of advisors. And so they tend to be more active on at least some form of social media, but they can also, they also tend to have a lot of academic contacts, and they will be hopefully helping us build a lot of college chapters by getting people who are inclined towards our viewpoint involved. Like they might first find some of their policy work online and then find the party through that because they are publicly supporting the party. So that eventually will filter down into more areas of the country as we get more of these alumni networks as well from different colleges like CUA, Notre Dame, Wheaton, Calvin. It's happening a little bit faster at some of the big Catholic colleges than it is the small Catholic colleges or the evangelical colleges. But actually we've gotten several faculty supporters from Baylor this year, such as Karen Swallow Pryor and Thomas Kidd. And so all of that, I guess, circling back to the local part, for each one of you, stay in touch with your state chapter and hopefully they can give you local contacts. And then for your personal networks, just stay involved in the policy conversations on things like ranked choice voting, environmental issues, pro-life, and get your friends to hopefully join some of those people through some of the intellectual opportunities and the service opportunities.
Thanks, Skylar. And I know that we would love to have some support at historically Black colleges as well.
Yes.
Thomas, Albert, any updates or potential on obtaining a Howard University chapter at any point in time?
Let's see how things go tonight and see what happens with the polls, and then we have something to talk about.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right, let's go to a question from one of our viewers. This question comes from American Solidarity Party National Committeeman Michael Beard. So the question reads as follows: what do Brian and Amar think is the biggest lesson they have learned while campaigning? So Brian, I believe this would go to you at this time.
Well, yeah, I think the first thing that I would tell any future presidential candidate we have is pick Amar as vice president. He's done an excellent job, and a lot of whatever we accomplished tonight is due to him. We have an all-volunteer campaign. We don't have any paid staff. And that puts us in a very different category than other candidates. A couple of weeks ago, I saw Brock Pierce. He arrived in Cheyenne with a campaign bus and a staff of about 20 paid people. And so if we're going to be competing with that, we have to have volunteers that are able to go up and above beyond what you would expect of normal volunteers. And at some point, we will need to start hiring people. But our strength today is that we have volunteers. We have so many people who are so active and so willing to come out and work for us. And we will at some point have to transition away from that, but I almost hate to do that because it's so much fun working with people who are committed and willing to volunteer. And I was thinking today, all the different people that I owe thanks to. I'm going to spend the rest of my life thinking of more people that I should have thanked for what they did. But for example, we had over 500 people who volunteered to be electors for us. We actually, our elector count, I think, ends at 463. But we had more people that volunteered because we had some extras in some states. We had alternates. We had a full slate in Arizona. Even though we didn't get registered there, we had enough electors to do it. So we had over 500 people who volunteered to be electors. That's an enormous resource. And we also had state committee people in each state that were working and calling people. That's an enormous resource. One of the things we need to make sure that we do now is, as we have people telling us that they voted for us, we want to get them plugged into the state Facebook pages and somehow or another get them into a relationship with our committees. But we have an enormous amount that we started with, or will start with tomorrow morning, that the people that showed up to help us this year, that we didn't know at the beginning of the year, and they all turned out and helped us. And that's, to me, that's the biggest lesson takeaway here.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that, Brian.
Yeah, and I guess I'd like to share, Brian. So we first met, so I'm a couple hours away in the coast of California. Brian's in the Valley. And Brian joined the party and was on the California chapter email list right around the time when I also found the party and started getting involved. And I emailed Brian. Yeah, I emailed Brian, actually. I was emailing everyone who signed up for the California email list. And Brian responded very enthusiastically about how he had just been to the Democratic convention to protest. And he was really interested in becoming a part of the party. And soon after that, we set up a kind of pop-up state convention, which Brian came to. And then, to make a long story short, eventually, was praying about running for Congress, eventually decided to, and then came to me with the idea of running for president. And here we are now. And it's been a really exciting journey. I was really glad to have drove with Brian to the One Life event in LA and held the banner with him. And so it's been a great honor.
Thank you, Skylar. And yeah, I definitely appreciate working with Brian as well as someone who's working on his social media team. And just seeing all his personal notes gets a lot of the Twitter and Facebook likes has been tremendously encouraging to me. And it really does show that we are getting our message out there. And I think that you were definitely the right person to put in front of our electorate at this time. So thank you for your being willing to run, Brian. All right, let's take another question. This one comes from YouTube. This one is from Andre Yurman. And he asks, are you planning to run on any state level elections in the near future? We do have one of our state level candidates, that write-in candidates with us right now, Mr. Shane Hoffman. So Shane, do you want to talk about your race at all this time, and then we can jump into some of the future races potentially in the work that we're getting ready for there.
Well, yeah, I decided to run for Congress. I am a write-in candidate for Ohio's 15th congressional district. As far as I know, I'm the only one out there right now. But we have a lot of plans to start recruiting and training candidates. I know a lot of people question why we're deciding to try to run a candidate for Congress right now. And in Ohio, I think it's helped get a little bit of word out that, you know, the ASP is more than just a presidential candidate. It's also given me some background information. I've started working with some other members of the party, and we are putting together, I won't call them candidate in a box kits, but we're starting to put those manuals together to help people know where to start. My biggest problem was I was just like running through molasses for the longest time. I was trying to figure out what paperwork has to get filled out. Do I have to file with the state and the federal government? Do I have to file anything locally? Do I have to set up a bank account? I think where I got stuck the longest time was the information is contradictory. You have to have a committee to get a bank account, but in order to get them the other way around, it has to be the other way around. That took a long time, and fortunately we had another party member who was able to help with that. So we're trying to reduce that confusion in the future, recruit a couple of candidates to run at local, state, and federal level in order to give that extra exposure and start getting those victories so that we can start showing that we have people in office, whether it's in a mayoral election, which may be my next run. My mayor moved and is no longer in the area. We have a special election in May. I'm going to try to test out our economic agenda in a local mayoral race, and then we'll go from there, hopefully recruiting more candidates throughout Ohio and hopefully the nation, and we'll be able to help them on their way with our candidate packets.
All right, and thank you so much for being willing to share about your experience as a candidate, Shane. So Patrick, do you or Skylar want to share about some of the other candidates that we know of or that are currently in office right now that are members of the American Solidarity Party, or talk about some people that you know may be interested in running and what that preparation work is like?
Skylar may know more about it than I do. I know that we have a number of members in local office, but Skylar, do you have more details about that?
Yeah, so we have 2 members of local government in Pennsylvania who have publicly identified with the ASP. Bethany Warren is on a city planning commission. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of her town. And then we have Lou Rutkowski, who's the mayor of St. Mary's in Pennsylvania.
She's in Beaver Falls, right?
Bill Fleming, if you're listening, it would be great to. What's that?
She's in Beaver Falls, PA, right?
Beaver Falls, thank you. So Bethany Warren in Beaver Falls, Lou Rutkowski, the mayor of St. Mary's, who's been active on some of our Facebook groups, and Bill Fleming, if you're listening, it would be great to get them both on the podcast. We have a few other local officials who are following the party with interest, but haven't publicly declared yet that they're interested in the party. And then a few others who are, so some of those are people who just like our social media stuff, and others are people who actually have joined the party privately, but don't publicize it.
So Wikipedia should be up. Yep. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yep.
Yeah. We try to get those on Wikipedia once they publicly declare for the party. And I really want to encourage Shane Hoffman and others who are thinking of running for local office. We've had a few candidates run for local office kind of, with the party's endorsement. And so we're hoping to get a win in that category next year. Someone who's not already in office, but running with the party support, and kind of beef up our policy areas with the help of Strong Towns, whose president, Chuck Maron, has endorsed Brian Carroll for president, and is also on our party's board of advisors. So we want to use his knowledge long-term. Patrick, do you happen to have any updates about John DeBerry's race in Tennessee for state legislature?
No, so my understanding is that none of the precincts have reported in the Memphis area where John DeBerry is running. I don't know if you guys have talked about that race already.
I don't
I
think
think,
so.
I think JP might have some.
Okay, JP does have some. So I'll let him take it away then.
Yeah, I have some early results, and they're just early results, and it's not looking good.
That's too bad.
Oh,
So for
what,
background, go ahead.
go ahead,
Sorry.
Scott.
It's a 79-21. His opponent is crushing him 79-21, and they don't have it listed how much of the vote is in. But it's not looking good for DeBerry at the moment.
Oh, that's unfortunate. So DeBerry is a Democratic state legislature in Tennessee who had to get on the ballot as an independent. He was kicked off the Democratic primary ballot, not even allowed to run in the primary because he is pro-life. And he gave some really good speeches in the legislature as well. And the Tennessee State Committee, including Patrick, who's on this show here, gave DeBerry a late endorsement. It's always a little bit of a controversy of whether to endorse someone who has not joined the party officially. But Patrick was at the last minute after that endorsement able to get in touch with DeBerry. And people generally receive that endorsement well. They like the idea of us getting involved in a state legislative race with someone who has a lot of name recognition. And it would have been really great then to have someone who would at least had some interest in our party in the state legislature. So now that it looks will not be back, we hope to somehow, although I think it would be far better if he were back, but we can try to encourage him and Lipinski to get more involved in the party since they don't have to worry about being in office.
Yes, thank you, Skylar.
DeBerry, by the way, was African American.
Yes. So I think we do have another update from Patrick in regards to Colorado. So Patrick, do you want to share about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I don't think anyone had discussed Colorado so far tonight, but that is one of the states where the ASP is on the ballot this year. And it's currently, at least on the New York Times section, I think has just been called for Biden with about 70% of the votes reported, but which was expected. What's interesting is because they have relatively easy ballot access there, you just have to have electors and pay a $1,000 filing fee, or it might be $500. In any case, it's easy ballot access, which means it's a very crowded ballot there. There's, I think, about 21 candidates currently listed on the Colorado ballot. And currently we are coming in 8th there with 1,491 votes based on the returns the New York Times has, and which is considerably higher than we got in 2016. I don't have the exact figure, but I believe that were reported for the ASP, and still have 30% of the ballots to come in. So we may be approaching 2,000 or more 2,000 or more votes in Colorado for the ASP, and that puts us ahead of quite a lot of other third-party and independent candidates, including some that are more well-resourced than we. So I'd say that's a result that I'm, mildly positive about. Just looking at the totals so far.
All right, thank you, Patrick. So let's shift our conversation back to some of these legislative initiatives that we were talking about earlier. So
wait, before we do that, I'd like to say that yeah, we got about 850 votes in Colorado in 2016. So I think about a 7th or 8th place is kind of par for the course for us in states where it's a pretty crowded ballot. There's several states where there's between 10 and 20 candidates, and we tend to get like between 6th and 8th place. But Colorado seems to have counted their votes faster, so it looks like it's one of our best states, when we'll actually just have to see, as other states were on the ballot come in slower, if we surpass that. You said it's almost 2,000 votes, Patrick?
It's currently 1,500. I was saying we because there's about 30% of the votes that come in, we get as many as 2,000.
Colorado has
Right.
been reporting them in much quicker the past few years due to the fact that they do mail-in balloting mostly now.
I see. Right. Yeah, I think it's the states that have a hybrid of mail-in and in person that have them. And then we do have some results in from Wisconsin. I had a computer freeze up, so I don't have it right in front of me, but Don Blankenship of the Constitution Party at 11,000 votes. And it seemed that Trump is pretty well ahead in the numbers in Wisconsin right now. So we're not in that margin of error to potentially win the election right now. Is anybody there?
Tachi, were you trying to cut in? I think you're muted.
Yeah, apologies about that. Yeah, apologies. But welcome to those of you who are joining us now for the very first time. So what we are doing is we are hosting a Q&A. So please do not be hesitant about posting a question in the Q&A. We will try to address those as the night goes on. So as we were talking about just prior to this topic, we were starting to get involved in the legislative initiatives, the various ones that are currently being considered throughout the country. So there are several that are abortion related, and I think that Shane, we were going to be talking about those, and anyone else on our panel who wants to talk about either the Colorado or the Louisiana ballot initiatives that are currently going on. So Colorado, that is Proposition 115, and in Louisiana, that is Amendment 1.
Yeah, just the short form of both of those. Proposition 115 in Colorado is a 22-week abortion limit. And after that, it would be a health of the mother issue. They're polling neck and neck right now at about 42% in favor, 45% against. So I think that's probably within the margin of error. That one will be tight. And the penalties for violating that for doctors, I think it's a class 1 misdemeanor, which means they would get a fine, a small fine, and could potentially lose their license for up to 3 years for being in violation of that. The Louisiana amendment is a little different. That is a fallback. If Roe v. Wade should fall, that amendment would go into effect saying that essentially there is no right to abortion in Louisiana. And there's already a trigger law in place that would make abortion illegal, and the amendment would make it much more difficult to repeal that law. So this one, I can't find any polling data on it, but this one will be important to watch. I think there are a couple of other states that have triggers in place, but Louisiana is the only one I see currently working on one.
All right, thank you for that, Shane. And then JP, I think you do have some additional information about that Louisiana amendment, especially. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, the Louisiana amendment is currently passing at about a 2-to-1 ratio at 66 to 35, according to New York Times file. The Colorado proposition is losing 59 to 41 with the noes in favor.
That's unfortunate. But Louisiana, is that yes or no?
The yeses are at the 2/3 lead right now.
Oh, that's some good news. That's it's good to have some encouraging win.
No, and that's definitely encouraging to see, and I do think that a constitutional amendment to the state constitution does mean that it is much stronger than any other sort of House bill. So that is definitely very encouraging to see. And I know that Louisiana does have a history of passing other pro-life related legislation. So that's definitely good to hear. So in terms of our conversation, why don't we switch our time over to our back to the party, actually. So the American Solidarity Party and some of our potential party goals over the next year or two. So Skylar and Patrick, do you want to talk about initial goals that we have?
Sure. Let's see. So I already mentioned about the like how people can get active in local chapters. So it involves trying to get some like-minded people together to determine what's realistic for that particular local area, whether it's running a candidate for city council now or getting involved in more intellectual or service projects. We do want to get at least some candidates in places that have elections in 2021. So that would include New Jersey and Virginia legislatures. Quite a few states have local elections. I know that Pennsylvania does, and Ohio does, which Shane is thinking about running for. I think there are some in California. And then also gearing up for the 22 elections, where pretty much every state has some important elections going on. In 2018, for example, we had several candidates running in California, but then for various reasons, we didn't really get that part of things continuing into 2020. But now that we have this momentum from our, all of our new members from the presidential campaign, we think we can get good people to run for office. But I think it should be more about more than just about running for office. It should also be about building the movement by getting the ASP to be a known name in the intellectual circles where we can be most influential. A lot of Christian circles, but not exclusively Christian. And also just among regular ASP people doing good work on pro-life, electoral forum, environmental, housing justice. Consider several different policy areas. Religious liberty, that we need to think of about this intensively. And local chapters have the option to do more or less of our national focuses if they want. But I think we do need to have them because our platform is so large that it can be a little bit hard for people to decide on a specific project.
Yes, thank you for that information, Skylar. Anything to add, Patrick, or any of our other national committee members? Albert?
Well, from my perspective, yeah, I think that getting the local organization like Skylar is talking about is going to be really important because there always is there's always a bit of a drop off in activity after a presidential election. That's always going to be a time where you have the most enthusiasm, the most new members, the most donations. And so what you have to do is capitalize on that. And during the lull that always naturally happens, still be doing work that's moving the party in a direction. And in some ways, I don't think we did that enough after 2016. And so our challenge is going to be to have the kind of sustainable growth to get the party to a new level during the next couple of electoral cycles. And so part of the ways that we're looking to do that is to kind of optimize our operation a little bit when it comes to things like fundraising and outreach and communication with our members, and strategizing about that. And our hope is that we will be able to do not just incrementally a little bit more 2022 or 2024, but that we will be able to do, exponentially more, that we will be qualitatively different kind of organization that we will have the kind of resource will enable us to reach numbers of voters on a level that we've just never done before. And I'm optimistic that we can do that with, the kind of growth and all of the, great new leaders that we brought into the tent in the last year or two. I'm really looking forward to what we can do.
And Tai Chi, there's another thing that I'm really excited about is that the American Solidarity Party represents an idea, an ability to redefine how we do politics and governing in the United States. So when we say things like the common good, one of the problems that the Republicans and Democrats get into is that they get elected and then they're constantly locked in this kind of battle with one another. And they're not really about taking ownership. I mean, there was a meme that we had going around where we were comparing different Lord of the Rings characters to kind of how people end up, how, people think they're Aragorn, they, as they run for office, I think they said, they kind of act like Faramir. People tend to see them as Boromir maybe, and then in reality, they're Denethor. Well, the issue with the stewards of Gondor, so let's be nerds for a moment, because a lot of us in the American Solidarity Party are nerds. The real issue with the stewards, and it's what I think, and Patrick is trying to contain himself right now, and I think it's really the issue with the Democrats and Republicans, is that what made the stewards bad is that they never actually took ownership of Gondor. They preserved it as it was, but they didn't act like the king would have, which is to do new things, to advance a new agenda, to try to change things, to reform the system. They just kept it going, almost froze it in stasis because it wasn't really theirs. They were just a stand-in. For generations, they were just a stand-in. That's Republicans and Democrats right now. They don't really take ownership of the problems in the United States. It's not just President Trump not taking responsibility. They're all not taking responsibility. They're all failing to look at the real problems that face us. There was a question, is there a wedge issue that would affect politics today in the way, say, slavery did for the Republican Party when it overtook the Whig Party? I think there's actually really 5 wedge issues that are not being dealt with. One of which is automation. No one's really looking at how automation is going to transform work in America and what that's going to mean for the future of the working class, what that's going to mean for the future of the kind of immigrants that will be able to come into the United States and find work. The environmental equity that we talk about a lot as a party is really a football that Democrats and Republicans play with. It's not seriously considered as something that deals with, that crosses color lines, class lines, the impact on the environment, whether it has to do with water resources, whether it has to do with clean air, whether it has to do with climate change. All of that really does get kind of shunted to the side and not dealt with as seriously as it really could have. Then we also deal with the concentration of wealth. The concentration of wealth, which prevents us from having the kind of investment we need in our resources, in our infrastructure, in our schools, within our communities, the way that capital is being concentrated, and then it can't be invested because people have more money than they know what to do with. That's a real problem for our society, and it's going to hurt our innovation in the future because a few firms aren't really going to come up with the innovation we need in the future because there's not enough brains working on it. It's too concentrated. Then we have to deal with freedom of conscience, that people in the United States need to be free to disagree and remain neighbors, and to not have that be something that we're contentiously fighting over as to whether or not people really have freedom of conscience and freedom of belief in this country. And then the final major wedge issue that we have to deal with as a country that's not being dealt with is going to be healthcare. Yes, you had the Affordable Care Act, which had all sorts of problems in it and was basically supporting the insurance companies while pretending not to. And then the Republicans have had a decade to come up with a solution and have not. Those are the issues we have to look at. But where ASP can even go beyond those, and where I'm really excited, is that we begin to create a politics of governing, and even in the nonpartisan races. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of things we focus on: running for House, running for the Senate, running for the presidency. But down at the local level, we have commissions, we have school boards. The ASP can become the centerpiece of a new movement of ideas generated by the American people, where what we're doing is we're reimagining how school boards function. It's a nonpartisan race, but the party becomes the center where people come together. So you can have party affinity groups. It's nonpartisan, but you can have the ASP school board or school association as part of the party, and where people who are interested in the kind of governing that goes on in the school board coalesce together, and then they coordinate going for different school board races across the country, and they bring a different philosophy to how to run our schools and to make our students more competitive with the world, because that's who they're competing with right now and will be for the rest of the 21st century. And our students are falling behind, and they're going to find that our economy won't be able to keep up in 10 years because we're not producing the workers and the innovators who are able to match what's being produced overseas. Then you have to do with what Brian was talking about, resources and soil and energy. So there's a lot of nonpartisan commissions that govern those resources. They govern water in different counties and regions. They govern electricity. Get people together who care about those issues, organize within the party, and then start going for those races. A lot of these are appointed, and that means lobbying your local government and your state legislature to get people appointed to these positions who will then make these decisions as citizens. But this party can be the place where they come together and organize, not just for partisan electoral races, but for holding the offices that are going to be necessary to actually move America forward. And all these different commissions, whether it's heritage and people are arguing over history, we have ASP people who care about that, organize them, get a philosophy, get an idea behind it, and then start getting appointed to different heritage boards so that you can come up with a way to introduce history and preserve history for future generations of Americans on the basis of our proposals for really a common good in a country that's welcoming to all Americans and that's built for all Americans. That's where we go beyond the two major parties and we become the true party of government, not just electoral politics, but the party of administering a common good whole life society.
Yes, thank you for
That's really impressive, Albert, especially the breakdown of the several important issues and the call to, the civic activity. And I will say, somebody said you is their favorite Tolkien book club. So it's definitely a theme we've got going.
Condor needs no king.
Yes.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Virginia is basically, Gondor, and we're Numenorians, and we allow the rest of you to exist in the country that we built. But we love you out in the provinces. We love you out in the provinces. So much love from Virginia.
Thank you, Albert. And I definitely do agree with you that those are some very salient wedge issues. So if we want to discuss those in greater detail in subsequent conversations, I think that's definitely worthwhile. I think especially the environmentalism, one may be of environmentalism and automation, both would be very much of interest to our viewers and our voters. Environmentalism, we're talking about immigration right now and the refugee crisis at the border, but when entire countries in Central America become completely uninhabitable in 20 years, this is going to be a lot worse. And there's going to be countries that are uninhabitable. There's going to be other countries that are completely submerged. So you're going to have refugees coming from everywhere. So we're going to need a process in place to deal with our neighbors and to support our neighbors and to be able to manage this all, because it is coming within our lifetimes.
I'd like to break in here with a little result. Juan Munoz, our 2016 vice presidential candidate, reports that our first write-in votes that we have, 694 write-in votes from Texas so far, which is about on par with 2016. I think we had something like 700 at about this time of night in 2016. So Texas is really interesting because it's like there were a few people from that state chapter who were really tempted to vote for Democrats or Republicans because it's a swing state. But we also got a huge influx of newer members from Texas, plus the ones we already had. So it's overall a pretty encouraging result.
Thank you, Skylar. And I do believe, so JP, did you have anything additional in Texas that you wanted to take us through?
Yes, I do.
Please go ahead.
Just some of the latest numbers from Texas is jumps up by 200,000. Still a lot more votes to be counted, especially in Dallas and Fort Worth and Houston and that area, but it's looking pretty good for Trump at this moment. Another state I'm starting to look at is Wisconsin. Trump's in the lead, and he's actually doing better this year in Winnebago County, the Wow counties around Milwaukee, even though a lot more votes have to come in from Milwaukee. Things are getting pretty tight around there, and one last change since I last talked about it. Trump has taken 100,000 vote lead in Ohio, with almost 70% in. A lot of the suburbs have started becoming a bit more red since I last checked. And that's all I have at the moment.
It's interesting. We saw a lot of those states early in the night that seemed to have positive numbers for Biden. That if they had gone for Biden early, it would have been a very bad sign for the president's real. But so far, everywhere where that's happened has narrowed in most cases. In North Carolina, appears to be neck and neck, and so on, as well as in you see Trump pulling ahead in Texas and Ohio. So it looks like it's going to be a very long night.
And we are starting to get our first results into Arizona.
Oh, cool.
So please go ahead.
Hang on. And in Arizona, it's Biden's in the lead. The big county I'm keeping my eye on is how much of a margin in Maricopa County, which is Phoenix, because whoever's leading in Phoenix usually wins the election, such as in 2018 when McSally went down to defeat to Sinema. Sinema won Maricopa County, so that's one county to keep an eye on. For Arizona anyway.
All right, thank you, JP. And then I believe you had a Senate update for us as well in South Carolina.
Yes, I do. Senator Graham has been reelected. Polls have indicated that this race would have been tightened, but looks like Graham put off a big margin tonight.
Thank you for the update on that. That one was actually a very surprising result there. I know that he was under a lot of pressure because of his waffling a bit on the president's initiatives and his initial stance. Him kind of moving away from it over time. Do any of our panelists want to weigh in on potential impacts to the country that these results are potentially showing as we're seeing them right now? All right, and if not, let's move over to a question from a viewer. This question.
I'm sorry, I missed that question. What was your what was it?
Yes, the question was: do any of our panelists want to weigh in on any of these races and potential impact for us going forward? If there was a Republican victory, what that would look like for the party. If there's a Democratic victory, what that would look like for the party as well.
Right.
So,
yeah. I do think that in some ways a Biden presidential victory with the Republican Senate might lead to the somewhat more stability, whether that's good news or bad news. It would mean that there wouldn't be a lot of major erratic policy changes, which we might then have to pay for in a few years, depending on, as the social issues Albert mentioned might continue to get worse. On the other hand, we disagree with, many of us disagree with a lot of Democratic policy priorities, even on the issue of abortion. It's not necessarily that we have a problem with government programs to address income inequality, but the kind of over-centralization, over-bureaucratization, plus a lot of the life and religious liberty problems might end up making it so that we would have to be, in a sense, if it was a Democratic president and Democratic Congress. We would have to be almost a pressure group within the conservative movement not to go too far to the right. And then we could perhaps also be a pressure group within the left in order to, bring life and religious liberty issues up with the party that's dominating in government. And we might be strong enough to do both of those now in a way that we weren't last time. I think to some extent we'll be doing some of that no matter what the outcome of tonight's election is.
Yeah, which outcome would you see as solidifying the sort of stranglehold the Democratic Party has on the abortion idea that there's no room under the tent for pro-life people? Which results would you figure would make them dig in their heels on that, and which do you think would make them open the tent?
I think a lot of it will happen regardless. If there was, there's probably like a 1% chance of this happening, but if the Republicans won both the presidency and the Senate, obviously there would have to be, there would be just complete chaos within the Democratic Party, I guess. It's hard to tell what would happen. And that was the argument some people had for voting Republican anyway. On the other hand, some of the pro-life Democrats had pointed out that maybe, just maybe, Biden would actually allow pro-lifers to come to the table as president in a way that some other Democratic presidents wouldn't, even though he said now that he wouldn't during the campaign.
Anyone else have anything to add in that regard? And how do you guys think that this election will impact our outreach to labor voters specifically, if anyone has any thoughts regarding that?
I think it's difficult because it does seem like a lot of the mainstream labor movement is either very socially progressive and would not be interested in a pro-life candidate, especially one that's not going to win immediately. And then the opposition within the labor movement seems to be more of this working class conservative kind of thing, and actually more likely to back Trump's kind of Republican Party. And then we also don't really have, we're not really in the centrist or progressive faction of the labor movement or of the economic progressive movement. We're kind of a mix of both. And so that allows us to work with everybody, but it also makes, I think, all sides feel that we're not completely of their side. And so we'll have to have some difficult strategic discussions to see how we readjust that a bit.
All right, thank you for that analysis, Skylar. All right, let's move over to one of our questions from our viewers. This question comes from Mr. William Fleming. He says, this is a two-part question. What can we as individual members and supporters do to support the party and grow the party? How do we reach critical mass in our own states to make the ASP more competitive in the modern political environment?
I can address that. I think each person knows what their gifts are. And, I think my campaign manager, Desmond Silvera, ran for governor in 2018, and he concluded that that was not his gift. But he has been amazing as the brains behind everything else that this campaign has done. And so, each person has gifts. Each person has to ask himself, what are my gifts? And then look for ways to put those gifts to use. As of tonight, I become a former presidential candidate, which actually gives me some new freedoms. When I was the active candidate, a lot of programs, couldn't interview me because then they have to give equal time to the other candidates, and suddenly they don't have to do that anymore. I can continue to do interviews and other opportunities to spread the word on the party because I'm not the active candidate. And I have a novel that is almost done that I will focus on for the next couple of months and finish it. And then, I could very easily tour and do a lot of the kind of radio programs where they interview authors and those kinds of things that I can spread the word on Solidarity Party without being a immediate electoral threat. People don't have to worry about being seen next to me as a candidate. Even friends. I'd go to a pro-life thing and longtime friends would wave at me from across the room, but they didn't want to be standing next to me. And that ends now. And so each person kind of has to evaluate what their gifts are and where their interests are, and then consider where they can put those to use.
All right, thank you, Brian, on that question. Anyone else have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think I don't have anything to add to that, but I would like to say we just passed 4,000 votes in Illinois, and that is with about 50% of the votes reporting, 49.
Thank you for that information, Skylar. I think that's definitely very encouraging for us. All right, let's go to another question from our viewers. This one comes from Matt Bosley of New York. So what kind of election results do you think our future candidates will need to achieve in order for voters to see the American Solidarity Party as quote unquote viable?
It seems like we're about on par with the libertarians, and it's, they have, kind of gone up and down. They've never achieved more than 3% of the vote in the presidential race, but they have done some of what Albert is talking about with their getting elected to local city councils and commissions and all that, and also seeking appointments to those sorts of commissions. And so I guess it all depends on what you mean by viable. What I mean by comparing us to them is, like, in 1972, they were not on the ballot very much, and they didn't get a lot of votes. Then in 1976, they got on more ballots, but didn't get like a nationally noticed election result. Then 1980, they get 1% of the vote. So that's one possible path for us. I would love it. I would love for it to be even faster, but that's when they really started, about 7 or so years after their founding, to become more influential locally. And they also took the same path, even though they didn't have social media back then. They had these intellectual influencers who got college students involved, got scholars and people of that sort of mindset involved who believed in those values. And so we're doing that. We're really on the way to being noticed by lots of conservatives, especially, and also some progressives, as a force to be reckoned with there. The problem is that those sorts of people don't always have like a mass appeal where they're going to get hundreds of thousands or millions of people to follow them to actually.
All right, thank you for that, Skylar.
I think if I can add to that, the most important thing is we're a viable party if we're growing. We are definitely showing growth over the last 4 years, and we have a lot of more established parties that are stagnating. And obviously, if those parties are not growing, they are not viable anymore. But we're growing, and so we are going to be one of the big news items out of this election as far as alternative parties. We are going to be a big news item because we're growing. And as the Democrats for Life of America have to reevaluate where they are, you know, as if DeBerry is losing and Lipinski is out, they will have to reconsider where they're going to go. We can unite with some other growing parties or individuals. You know, Jade Simmons, I don't know how she's doing tonight, but her platform is very similar to ours, and we can work on partnerships there. I didn't even hear of her until August, and but she's made quite a splash since then. You know, if we can reach out and form some partnerships there, we will continue to grow, and as long as we're growing, we're viable.
Yeah, I would like. Yeah, I mean, you know, partnering with other third-party movements can be important. One interesting story of the night, in a lot of states where both we and Don Blankenship on the ballot were either ahead of him or like neck and neck, like Wisconsin. Blankenship has 1,892 votes. We have 1,801 votes. Now, the Constitution Party has a much narrower appeal in many ways. Like they have a very narrow platform and mindset, but they've had decades to organize in these states. And where we're on the ballot with only a few months of organization in many cases, we can get as many votes as them.
One thing I saw that I think speaks well for our messaging and how far it's come along. I don't know if anyone else was noticing this on Facebook and Twitter and that, but the number of people who were so excited because they just found the American Solidarity Party in the last 2 days, and they cast their vote for president for Brian. And I think that really says something for where we've come from, that someone will vote for a presidential candidate they just found. I think that speaks volumes for the messaging that's been developed over the last several months. And I think that is a very good sign for us moving forward.
Yeah, looking at some of these social media reactions, many of these are just taken straight from the Brian Carroll Twitter or Facebook itself. We are seeing a lot of people with a lot of very encouraging messages. So Josh Shelley in UNC says, this is not a moment, it's a movement. And he's gotten more than just him that's involved in voting for Brian. We have others saying that they are voting and coming away with a clear conscience. We're very happy to be able to provide that choice. And we've gotten a lot of, definitely what we touched on earlier in this broadcast, a lot of notable academics like Karen Swallow Pryor saying they voted for American Solidarity Party, and subsequently their followers also agreeing with that and saying that they did as well. So we're seeing somewhat of a virtuous cycle here. So one person doing so as an influencer and bringing in a lot more other people that are also interested. We have a lot of support. So again, with the Karen Swallow Pryor article in Christianity Today, Gracie Olmstead was amongst 3 people who endorsed the American Solidarity Party on the American Conservative blog, and it was a symposium of whom they supported. So her, Rod Dreher, as well as Howard Amundsen had voiced their support for Brian, and we're very grateful for that.
Did any of you see the article in Slate today? It came out kind of late on election day with a kind of average 20-year-old. And so they featured an American Solidarity Party voter who's kind of one of these young socially conservative converts who've been a big part of our party's base. I haven't been able to read that whole article, so but I think that's going to be worth looking at.
Yeah, that was a great piece. I don't know, it was either in Wisconsin or Illinois where they talked to that voter. It was somewhere we were on the ballot. Does anybody remember where it was? It might have been Illinois.
He himself was in New York.
He was okay. He was writing us in for some reason.
Right.
I thought he was in the Midwest somewhere. Yeah. So I mean, he just talked a lot about being alienated with the political spectrum because he's a committed Catholic and feels that he can't vote for a pro-abortion candidate, but also he believes in universal health care and a safety net and things like that. So he really has nowhere to go. And so, the ASP gets brought up several times over the course of the article. It's great exposure, but it's also just a great article on its own terms because it highlights, really what is missing in the political spectrum today. And, the reporter presses him a little bit and says, well, or do you think you're throwing your vote away? And he says, well, no, there's nothing that I feel like I can support, right? I mean, and that's what so many of our supporters and voters have said leading up to this election. And that's why you have seen so many people saying that they, this is the first time in a long time that they felt good about how they were able to cast their vote, that they feel at peace in some way. And if we didn't offer anything else to our supporters, that would be a great thing. But as it is, I think it's a great sign for, the direction of growth that we're heading in.
Yeah, I want to check out more results in Louisiana. We are in 5th place on a very crowded ballot in Louisiana. Libertarians in 3rd, Kanye West in 4th. And we have Brian Carroll, almost 1,500 votes. And then Jade Simmons is the next one far behind at almost 1,000.
All right, thank you for that update, Skylar. And yeah, that was just a small slice of the social media reaction that we've gotten. I spent a considerable amount of time helping with Brian's social media, just writing thank yous to people. So thank you so much, everyone who's supported us. I know that we are getting pretty late into our broadcast. So Brian, do you have any formal statement prepared for tonight that you'd like to share with supporters and notes of thanks that you would like to state?
Well, out here in California, the polls are still going to be open for another 30 minutes, I think. But it has been an incredible experience personally. There are so many people that I need to express thank yous to. There's just, for a while, I was able to keep up with the thank yous, all the people telling me they were voting for us, and just giving neat testimony saying, it's the first time they've ever voted. Some of these people are old enough that they could have voted 4 or 5 times before, and they just have not, because they've not been able to find a candidate they could support. And so it was thrilling to see those kinds, as a social studies teacher my whole career, trying to convince young people the value of voting and being part of our democracy. And today I got messages from some of my former students, telling me that they had voted. And so very, very satisfying that way. And, when I joined the party in August of 2016, I had looked at the 2 major candidates, and I said, this election, nothing good can come out of this election. It's a total loss. We need to start looking forward to the next one. And I never imagined in my wildest dreams that I would be the candidate. But it has been a fantastic experience, growing with the party, seeing the party grow, making so many new friends. And we still don't know what the final result's going to be. I think maybe I will wait. I'll probably be up till about midnight here, and maybe I'll make a statement and put that out before I go to bed. Otherwise, I'll do it in the morning when we see more what the results are. But it has been an incredible experience, an incredible privilege. There are so many people that I need to let them know how valuable their participation was, whether it was voting or some donations or participation, people who put signs out. I'd be interested to know from Bill Fleming how many people he thinks actually were out putting signs out. But that was fun to see as people reported back and took pictures of their signs and posted those. That was wonderful. And then it's, we can't look at this as the end. This is the beginning of the next cycle. We made tremendous gains. We organized some states that had not been organized, even states that like Arizona, where we were not ultimately successful. I think the folks in Arizona that were talking to each other and getting to know each other, I'm hoping that there's an ongoing committee there that will benefit us into the future. And I'm excited about a bunch of the states that are. I know Texas is already getting organized for the next year and elections that may come there. So there's a lot of exciting stuff to watch. It's been wonderful to be a part of it this far. And I'm excited about what the party's going to do in the future.
All right, thank you so much for that, Brian. Shane, was there any statement that you'd like to leave our broadcast with and our viewers with regarding your race in Ohio?
I was just kind of thinking along the same lines of Brian. I was using that phrase, "This is not the end." There is a future. I've got a little experience now. Some people may think, well, Shane, it looks like you're going to get 100 votes this time around. But, it's the experience I've picked up. I think that, like I said, this isn't going to be the end. There will be other races. There will be the sharing of experience. And I think that the ASP is going to see more people, especially as the experienced candidates we have start to collect their information and their years of experience and come together in a spot where new candidates can get a little advice from them on what it takes to get over that hump. Because fear is the biggest obstacle. Nobody likes to get up in front of people and talk. Nobody likes to, be afraid that they're going to have that brain freeze moment on camera or something. We can help each other get prepared. We can help each other get statements together, elevator speeches. We can help you learn how to start your fundraising by talking to friends and family and then moving on to trying to fundraise externally. We will be able to help each other, and we'll be able to build on the experiences that Brian has had over the last year or so as our candidate. And I am very much looking forward to doing what I can to help with that.
All right, thank you, Shane. And then Skylar, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to make for the party as a whole and statement?
Well, so as I mentioned, I joined the party in the summer of 2016. Got to know Brian very shortly after. I've worked with everyone else on this show, as well as many other friends who were not on tonight, but who developed very close relationships with, close friendships with online, and been able to meet a lot of the people on this show in person as well. Brian, Tai Chi, Patrick, and that's very meaningful, even in itself. Like, to be able to meet up with like-minded people. At the same time, we also need to all not so much look far from us personally, but yet inward into the party. We also need to look outward, but closer to us, into our local communities, and figure out how we can take these principles of a more just economy and life from conception to natural death and freedom of conscience, to be able to take those family values as well, trying to balance individual rights and the common good. And so we need to take those principles into our local communities. And I hope throughout this broadcast, we've shown a bit about how we can do that for those of you who are new. And we'd like you to keep the conversation up online and with your state chapters. Hopefully, meeting people whose interests you find to be in common, who can be your mentors. I will say, I tend to get obsessive about the election results, but it is worth noting that we have very much passed our 7,000 vote total that we had in 2016. And like many of us have been saying, the vote only happens every 4 years. The public intellectuals who've supported us have wanted us to, be really reminded of that. But we do really appreciate everyone who has voted for us and who've actually publicized their vote for us. It really means a lot, and we look forward to continuing to work with all of you.
And thanks, Skylar. Yeah, we've definitely grown the party every year throughout the past 4 years. Some analysis when I was treasurer was showing how many new membership ads there were, as well as how many people had dropped off every year. And yeah, we've been in a positive trend throughout the past 4 years. So that's definitely a very exciting to see. Now, yeah, just given some growing pains that we've had previously, do you anticipate any type of similar growing pains going forward in the near future, or do you think that we should look to new challenges at this time?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few issues where people in the party disagree. Some of the family values issues, you might call them. We have a variety of different points of view. Economics, some very different points of view. The exact approach to some of the cultural justice, like racial justice issues. I think everyone is in favor of racial justice, but which specific actions do we take? But we're at a very civil point where everybody has been, behaving very well online over the last year. That's really encouraging to see. And that's even during the COVID crisis, where everybody, has had to get used to some big changes in their routines, or most people really have. We were able to weather that with very few problems internally, and that I'm very grateful for that. We've generally taken a pretty moderate line on it. Like basically supporting that each local community should decide, and that but the government should provide relief to small businesses and individuals. So there'll be some continued discussion about post-COVID relief that there'll be some disagreements about. There's also going to be some discussions about how easily to endorse pro-life Democrats who might be running. Democrats for Life is growing, and even with the big disappointments about Lipinski losing, as well as Marie Newman did end up winning her seat, so not as good of a possibility of Lipinski coming back, and DeBerry losing. With that being said, Democrats for Life is growing. Do we want to actually endorse Democrats for Life candidates as ASP state chapters? And if Republicans end up running some better candidates, how easily do we want to endorse them? I think those questions are going to, they've already been some of the most controversial discussions we've had in the last couple of months in our online groups. So we just need to be patient with each other, because everybody's going to want a slightly different strategy.
And speaking of some of those differences, I know that some of our differences are over economics, specifically between distributism and more of a social market type of a capitalist system. So we do have one question from the audience in that regard. It's from National Committeeman Michael Beard. Do we think distributism will be the answer for our economy that embraces melon during booms and Brandeis during busts, basically making distributism the sole system instead of the current melon and Brandeis hybrid that we now have? Not sure if anyone on our panel wants to take the lead on this one. So please go ahead if you do have an idea how to address that.
I feel like there's a big role here, and it's something I've been mulling over as I consider running for mayor. I think the idea that we can rebuild an economy into local and regional economies instead of these super condensed giant companies, like what we've seen with COVID, is that certain industries like the meat packing industry have condensed into roughly 4 locations. And when there's a disruption at one, it ripples throughout the entire country. But if we had smaller local distributors, more than just, the couple of butcher shops that are still in, we could weather these kinds of disruptions much better. I think the idea is that we're going to have to show how distributism is a benefit to people. We're going to have to show people a little bit more about how cooperatives and credit unions can affect their lives. So one of the things I was considering doing is starting to talk about how we can build internal competitors to the Amazons and Dollar Generals that use distributism within the frame of capitalism in order to start taking down these giant corporations that have taken the American dream away from so many and created what we call internally the race to the bottom for wages. We can show people how this more distributed ownership, because one of the things I think people fear when they hear distributism is everybody is afraid that it's actually socialism, but it would be redistributism if we were trying to get something closer to socialism. I think once we can get the idea out that we want everybody to have an ownership stake, not the government to be owning the businesses, that we can start to make the case for our economic model and how it is much more viable and will bring money back into the communities. I think that's the fear in my community, is that we're about to boom into a much larger situation. We're expected to triple our population sometime in the next 10 years. Right now we're at about 5,000. We should be at 15,000 very soon. And people don't want to see the character of our community eaten up. We have a number of Amazon and FedEx hubs building around us, starting to take everything up. They don't want to lose the character of their community. And I think if we can convince them that community ownership through cooperatives can help us keep money in our community and maintain our local character, that could be something we can take out and promote to the rest of the world.
Yeah, thank you for that, Shane. And I think the other point to add there is I think we do have some potentials for credit unions as another option instead of our traditional banking system. Even within banking, so I work at a bank right now. Even within banking, there's a lot of talk about the impact of these new fintech companies that are disrupting the system. So yeah, there's a lot of room for innovation in the financial sector as well. And I think we take a distributist idea like a credit union. That's not anti-capital in any way. It just means that we all own that money, and we're sharing it, similar to. I guess it might not be the most perfect example, but MetaShare and other systems that are being used. And so I think that there are definitely a lot of these co-ops and ways that we can get involved in the private sector to change our system. So we are getting close to that 10 o'clock Central time frame. JP, I'm going to break to you. Do you have any additional updates that you would like to go to at this time that we can talk about?
I want to look at some of the key states that have not been called yet, since most of the battlegrounds have not yet been called. First up is Pennsylvania. Trump's running up a pretty healthy margin at the moment, but there's a lot of Philadelphia still yet to be counted, as well as a lot more of Pittsburgh, so that's one to keep an eye on. And Virginia. Normally, Virginia has been more Democratic, but most of the votes have been counted already in places like Loudoun County, Prince William County, most of Arlington, most of Alexandria, and Fairfax cities, and Fairfax County is still out a bit. And a good chunk of Fauquier County is still out, but things are looking pretty much like Virginia is going to be closer than what polls have expected to be. Then going down to North Carolina, Trump has pulled up into a lead with almost 93% of the vote in, so there's going to be a call here anytime soon. Even though there's some votes out in Guilford County, which is Greensboro, Durham County, Wake County, Orange County, Chatham County, which is the Research Triangle out there. Georgia is still early because most of Atlanta is not in yet. Although the margin has tightened up in Cobb County. Florida is pretty much in the Trump category at this point. Then most of Texas is in at 82%, even though there's still enough votes left in Dallas and Houston area to make a difference or so. It's not looking good for Biden in there. Arizona, we have 75% in from the mail-in ballots, and Biden is still leading there. So that might be the race to look at. And the key another state is Iowa. Only 42% of the voters in. Biden's winning by 15 in a state where Trump won by almost 10 points, if I remember correctly, but it's not looking good there. Then Michigan, there's a lot more votes to come out of Detroit, but Trump's pulling up a good lead in that state. Wisconsin, Trump has a lead, and it looks like he's pulling almost the same numbers as he did in 2016 in the western part of the state. Switching over to the Senate side, North Carolina appears headed towards, Tom Tillis appears to be headed towards re-election at 92% of the vote in. Georgia, Purdue's in the lead right now, but the question is, will he be at 50% plus one because of the runoff law? While the other race there in Georgia is expected to go to the runoff because of how it split. And we have two seats that got flipped. Colorado has flipped to the Democrats, and Alabama has been won by Tommy Tuberville. So there's no gain in the Senate so far.
Wait, you said both of the seats in Georgia flipped?
No. Georgia, one of them appears headed to the one of them heading to the runoff for sure, and the other one appears to be possibly heading that way, but it's still too early.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that.
Then Michigan, the Republicans actually up, even though Detroit's still outstanding in votes. And that's all the ones I could find in the Senate right now.
All right, thank you, JP. That was very detailed. Yeah, definitely very valuable. Folks, if you have any remaining questions, please do type them into the Q&A and we will address them.
So I'd like to give a little bit of an update about our results. I'll try to keep it short, but we have well passed the 7,000 votes that we had at the end of the 2016 count, which is more like the end of November or even December, and that'll be the case this year as well. I think we've even passed 10,000. So we've passed 5,000 in Illinois. We're about to pass 2,000 in Wisconsin, just beating Don Blankenship of the Constitution Party by 1 vote.
I really hope we hold that. I really want to beat Don Blankenship.
Also about, yeah, me too. Oddly enough, he's well ahead of us in Colorado. I'm not sure, they must have a strong state chapter. But we're beating him by an extreme in Louisiana, although not beating Kanye West. So yeah, 5,000 in Illinois, 2,000 in Wisconsin, 2,000 in Louisiana, most 2,000 in Colorado. So that alone is 11,000. Rhode Island and Vermont, a little bit disappointing. But yeah, we have over 300 votes in Rhode Island, keeping up with Gloria La Riva. There are only 5 candidates in that ballot. And Arkansas and Mississippi, we are toward the middle of the pack at I think over 1,000 votes in Arkansas. And then we have those write-in votes coming in from Texas, at least 700 of those. And see, was there one more? I don't think so.
I noticed that we're also 3 votes down from Blankenship in Vermont. What I'm getting from this is that we have about at least as much appeal as the Constitution Party when people actually get a chance to vote for us.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting about Kanye West. It'll be interesting to see what he does from here and whether we can pick up some of his voters. We just don't know exactly what precisely they're interested in about him, and whether in fact they are really closer to us or not.
Somebody want to take that question from Vince before we wrap up?
Yes. So the question from Vince Coiro is, what do you think the top 5 states to be optimistic about would be for the year 2024?
So I guess for presidential, it's going to be a different answer than locally. And I think locally, it'll really be more about regions of states rather than necessarily states as a whole. Especially any town that has a Catholic or Christian college, we can hope to build more of a local foothold in. But I think we can, if we can find a way to get ballot access in Illinois, I think we can build on the momentum there. And the reality is that we should really be better off in swing states, or sorry, in safe states rather than swing states, even though we're doing fairly well in Wisconsin, compared to Illinois. But I would say Illinois, Louisiana, as far as states that we're not on the ballot, but we should be able to get on the ballot next time, Utah, which is usually pretty friendly to third parties, perhaps Idaho, and also Tennessee and Washington, where we barely missed being on the ballot, could end up, we have really energetic chapters now there as well.
I think I have another prediction. So this depends on how things go, but I think if the initiatives to get Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. added as states passes, I think we might see some interest in both those locations. In D.C. specifically, because we have a chapter at the Catholic University of America that's pretty strong, as well as a pretty well-developed D.C. and Maryland chapter. And in Puerto Rico, because of that Latin American influence and that already established tradition of Christian democracy there. I think it's really interesting to see how the sides have flipped between Democrat and Republican on the aspect of statehood. Because traditionally within the Democratic camp, you had a lot of stronger Puerto Rico independence activists with it there. And then the Republican Party, the governor there caucuses with Republicans. And all the pro-statehood people in, or many of them in Puerto Rico are more Republican aligned. However, the mainland Republicans
well, that's all
don't necessarily
about trying to find good activists there.
Right. So I think that there are local.
Right. Yeah, it's all about having good activists there.
Right. And I think there are local parties there that we can develop a relationship with that are aligned with us. However, much remains to be seen as to how those issues develop as well.
And with DC, I think there's a lot of the influencers that we're talking about who are active in think tanks and Twitter, political commentary, and Catholic Christian publications. I'm not sure how many of them vote in DC and how many of them vote in Maryland or Virginia.
Yeah. So the other interesting. Oh, go on, please.
But we also need to, we need to keep cultivating them. But for the states where we're going to get write-in votes counted, so we would expect to get fewer write-in votes. But in some of the big states like Michigan and California, Ohio, maybe especially California because it's a safe state, we could end up getting 1,000 or 2,000 write-in votes. So I would expect we'll definitely get more than 20,000 votes total this election. If things keep going really well with later counts and all that, we could even get up to 50,000 still.
Yeah, I think a lot depends on the size of the write-ins, and it's just really hard to judge how many we'll get. We could get, most of our votes last time were write-ins, right? And we said we probably got about 5,000 write-ins. This time we could get that. We could get 10,000. We could get way more than we expect. If I had to give a conservative estimate, I'd say we might get another 10,000 write-in votes for somewhere around 30,000 total, but I could be pleasantly surprised. So.
Even while I've been sitting here, I have gotten 2 messages from North Carolina saying that they voted for us, even though we won't get results from North Carolina. I'm sure I've had at least 5 or 6 individuals write and tell me that they voted from us for North Carolina. We've had people in South Carolina and West Virginia write to say that they voted for us. We won't get results from those states. But we do have a bunch of votes coming from, I think we've got some from Montana and some from Arizona, again, where we won't know how many we got, but we have people telling us that they were there and they voted for us.
Right.
I think
and there might be a few, a few counties which will choose to count them. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll just have to see. But as far as going into the future, I think the states that we have the best chance in are the states where we can recruit some down ballot people. When we have a rally of some kind, and we have somebody local, running for mayor, and we can bring in a candidate for governor or president to the local one, that creates the kind of excitement that builds the party. So we really need to focus on in the next 2 years, filling some down ballot positions or running candidates for down ballot positions. That's where we're gonna build the party.
Right. And it will be very interesting to see as we comb through the data a bit more, are there other places like Boone County, Illinois, where we get over 1% of the vote? I think we're all just rushing around here right now and we only have a few states. It would be especially interesting if we got over 1% of the vote in a county in a write-in state. But for the write-in states, maybe we would look at even 0.5% as a amazing result that we would want to, where we want to invest more effort. I think last time our best result was in the area around Franciscan University of Steubenville in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that one other point that should be discussed is we had some predictions in the media that third parties would perform terribly this electoral contest because people are so polarized, and the nation's so polarized between the Republicans and the Democrats. I personally, I don't think I'm seeing that here. In fact, I think
Libertarians over 1%, right?
Right, right. I think we're seeing a surge in interest in third parties, and I think that's very encouraging for us going forward. I'm not sure if Skylar, you or JP want to touch on that point a little bit more.
Yeah, it does seem like the I don't have the green numbers comparatively, but it seems like they are might not be doing so well. The libertarians comparatively are not doing so well, but they are ahead of where they were back in 2008, where they were way below, like 2004, 2008, they were way below 1%. They're keeping over 1%. And so that's not bad for this kind of election year. I guess what's interesting is that there's not, for the non-libertarian, non-green third parties, there hasn't been one which has really taken the leadership of kind of alternative third parties. There's Rocky De La Fuente and Brock Pierce and Jade Simmons and us and Kanye West. We're all kind of in the mix, and it really depends on, like, some states, each of us is a bit stronger. And I haven't quite yet been able to see an overall trend across the country about which ones to watch out for next. But I do hope that we will run a presidential candidate again in 2024. I think it will still be necessary.
All right, thank you for that, Skylar. So we are just past 10 p.m. now, Central Time, and 11 p.m. For our Eastern Time neighbors. So I do want to be respectful for everyone's time, and I know that people have families and they may be tracking additional races on their own independently after our broadcast ends. So does anyone have any closing thoughts before we adjourn for tonight as a group and go our separate ways?
Sure. There's one thing I'd like to say, which is that this is just the end of the first part of the beginning of the party's history. This has been a big coming out party for us as the part of the election, with more people learning about us, a lot of good media attention, a lot of celebrity and thinker attention. People who have taken a chance on us to cast their vote for Brian and for Amar, people who have wanted to feel good for the first time in a long time about casting their vote, need to know that we will be here tomorrow, that this is not just a runoff for us. We have done what we intended to do. We spread the word, and now we need you to become our advocates. The thing you can do for us, for the party, is to let your friends and neighbors know why you voted for the American Solidarity Party, why you feel good about voting for us, and how you can share that feeling by running for office yourself, or helping a petition drive to get people on the ballot, recruiting people who are already office holders, who are feeling squeamish about their current party and are perhaps looking for a home, and getting people to flip and to switch and join. And that's often how this has happened in American history, where current office holders will say, you know what, I'm going to join this new party because it actually gives me the vehicle and the voice to say how I truly feel and to really represent my constituents and be true to the values that I want to promote for my community, because I live here and I love this place, and the two major parties aren't doing what our community needs. That's tomorrow. So that's what I want to leave people with, is tomorrow, the real work, the hard work begins, of showing that we have staying power and that we're not going anywhere. And this is not a fluke. The only way up is to keep working. And so we're going to work our way up every single day after this. And I want to thank everyone who has joined the party, who has supported the party, who took a chance, who resisted all the nonsense about throwing away your vote and decided that this is where they belonged. Everyone who felt that they were politically homeless or were told they're politically homeless, and who said, no, actually, I found a place. Well, let's make this place bigger for everyone else.
Hey, Albert, you want to run for something?
Yeah, run for something.
Not at the moment, but maybe Patrick will be able to twist my arm later.
Thank you for that, Albert. Quick update. So before we get back to closing thoughts from people, I just heard from the Associated Press impressed that Amendment 1 just passed in Louisiana. So for pro-life votes, that is something to applaud. JP, do you want to talk about that real quick?
I can yes say I haven't been tracking the results as closely, but
Guys.
it's really sorry, JP, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just getting it up on my screen. And it appears to have passed 65 to 35.
Really encouraging to hear.
That's great news to hear. Excellent, excellent. All right, anyone else with any closing thoughts before we adjourn for tonight?
I do have fun. Stay safe out there tonight.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Thank you, JP.
Yep. So we are approaching, we passed 2,000 votes in Louisiana, approaching 3,000 votes in Wisconsin, well past 5,000 in Illinois. And as I mentioned, 5th place in Louisiana in a crowded field. I think that state chapter has done especially well in a short amount of time. And Illinois as well. Wisconsin, we are still just slightly ahead of the Constitution Party. And yeah, it'll be great to, we'll definitely keep tracking results on the Facebook and Twitter page. And as Albert, I just want to echo everything that Albert said. I think that was a really great close. Albert and Brian, I think both make great closing statements this election night, and really looking forward to continuing our work.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us. All our audience, both on this webinar as well as on YouTube, thank you. To all our panelists, especially to JP for doing the hard work of looking up all these races for us while we're busy talking. We really do appreciate your help with that. And thank you again to our candidate, Brian Carroll, also to our candidate, Shane Hoffman, for joining us this evening. This is Tai Chi Kuo signing off tonight. And like Albert said, let's get ready to work tomorrow. All right, take care.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.